Audiobook title: What if Optimus Prime and Master Chief with Unsk Infinity crashed into Middle-earth? Part 01 completed. Writing by Zephyr Audiobook, with AI assistance. The intro. Welcome to Zephyr Audiobook. History is a tapestry of stories, but sometimes the threads of destiny collide in ways no chronicler could foresee. Today, we journey to a Middle-earth forever changed. What happens when the magic of the Third Age meets the unyielding steel of the 26th century? What happens when a Spartan's resolve and a Prime's compassion stand against the shadows of Mordor? From the wreckage of the Unsk Infinity to the fires of Mount Doom, this is a tale of three worlds becoming one. Prepare yourself for the definitive crossover saga. This is the Age of Iron and Grace, a fellowship of three worlds. Sit back, find your light, and let the wind of the story carry you. Chapter 00. The convergence of iron and grace. The fabric of existence is not a single, immutable tapestry. It is a layered veil, woven from the threads of time, probability, and the song of creation, and it is thin enough to tear under the concentrated weight of destiny. In the silent, suffocating vacuum of the slipspace stream, the Unsk Infinity, a 5.5-kilometer monument to human defiance, was screaming. It was a sound that did not travel through air, for there was none. Instead, it was the structural agony of foreigner-derived alloys being twisted by a physics they were never designed to endure. The ship's engines, usually humming with the controlled precision of a captive star, began to vibrate at a frequency that bypassed the ears and rattled the marrow of the 5,000 souls aboard. On the bridge, Captain Thomas Lasky gripped the edge of the holotable so hard his knuckles turned a ghostly white. The world was turning inside out. Outside the reinforced, multi-layered viewports, the non-space of the slipspace dimension, typically a chaotic swirl of bruised purples and ethereal blues, was being bleached into blinding, impossible radiance. Report. Lasky's voice was a harsh rasp, fighting against the roar of venting atmosphere and the rhythmic thud of failing inertial dampeners. Core stability is at 0. We aren't just dropping out of slipspace, Captain, we're being evicted. The weapon, the Unsk's most sophisticated AI, flickered on her pedestal. Her holographic form, usually a calm, steady shade of blue, strobed with amber warnings and lines of scrolling code. Something is pulling us. It's not a gravity well, and it's not a guardian's pulse. It's a summons. The slipspace manifold is being written by a mathematical language I don't recognize. It's not foreigner, Captain. It's older. It's primordial. In the sub-vessel bays, Spartan 117, the Master Chief felt the shift in his very bones. He was magnetized to the deck of the Pelican Bay, his Mjolnir Gen 3 armor locking its servos to keep him upright as the ship tilted at an impossible angle. He didn't ask for a status update. He was a student of the vacuum, and he could feel the infinity dying around him. The air grew cold, the lights died, and then a light far brighter than a supernova took them all. Across a different cosmic meridian, a space bridge of Cybertronian design buckled under the weight of a sudden, localized temporal storm. Optimus Prime, the last of the Primes, was mid-transit between worlds. His massive, cobalt and crimson frame was suspended in a slipstream of pure energon and chronological fire. He sensed the disturbance before his sensors could even process the data. The matrix of leadership within his chest cavity pulsed a rhythmic, golden heartbeat that resonated with the very soul of the universe. He felt a presence, vast and ancient, far beyond the reach of the Decepticon conflict or the reach of Primus himself. It was a consciousness that smelled of sea salt, mountain air, and the first dawn of a world that had never known the touch of a machine. Rest now, child of Primus. A voice echoed in the secret chambers of his spark. It was a voice that carried the weight of the valor, the architects of Ardor. Your war is eternal, but your path has been diverted. A shadow grows in the east of a world not your own. You shall be the shield against the coming dark. Optimus did not struggle. He felt his molecular structure being bathed in a grace that felt like the light of 1,000 suns. His systems were not being dismantled, but enhanced, recalibrated for a reality where the laws of physics shared their throne with the laws of song. He felt the dimensions around him fold. A subspace pocket, infinite and silent, opened within his reach, a gift of the valor, allowing him to carry the weight of his mechanical heritage into a world of flesh and stone without shattering it. The shattering of the sky over the northern reaches of Middle-earth, near the frozen wastes of Forodwaith and the towering, snow-choked peaks of the Blue Mountains, did not merely cloud over. It shattered. To any observer, wandering ranger of the north, a shivering orc in a mountain crevice, or a sharp-eyed great eagle of the peaks, it looked as if the firmament had become a mirror and then been struck by the hammer of a titan. Shards of blue light and crystalline fire rained down, setting the clouds ablaze. First came the Unsk Infinity. It did not fall, it bled into reality. The massive carrier, scorched by vacuum and trailing arcs of rogue electricity, plummeted through the atmosphere. Its structural integrity fields, pushed to their absolute breaking point, glowed a dull, heating red. The ship's descent was a thunderclap that rolled across the lands of Eriador, shaking the foundations of the prancing pony in Bree and reaching the sensitive, pointed ears of Lord Elrond in the hidden valley of Rivendell. With a roar that tore the very air into ribbons, the Infinity skipped across the lower atmosphere. Automated thrusters fired in a desperate, AI-coordinated attempt to level the 5-million-ton vessel. It finally came to a rest, not by crashing, but by sliding. It plowed into a massive glacial valley between the northernmost spurs of the Misty Mountains, carving a trench miles long. The impact sent a plume of snow, ancient ice, and pulverized rock 10,000 feet into the air, a white curtain that veiled the mechanical god from the world. Silence followed, heavy, pregnant, and thick with the scent of scorched titanium and ozone. Miles away, in a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks that seemed to huddle together in fear, a second meteor struck, but there was no explosion, no violent displacement of Earth. Instead, a pillar of golden light stood for a moment, solid and brilliant as a diamond, before dissipating to reveal a titan of metal. Optimus Prime knelt in the dirt of Middle-earth. His cooling vents hissed, releasing steam into the cool, crisp mountain air. He rose slowly, his gears grinding with a musical, rhythmic precision that sounded like a cathedral's clockwork. He stood 30 feet tall, his shadow long and imposing under the setting sun. He looked at his hands, then at the horizon. The air was rich, impossibly rich with the scent of pine, damp earth, and a lingering, potent magic that made his senses spike with unknown variables. "Where am I?" he whispered. His voice was a deep, resonant cello that seemed to harmonize with the wind rather than fight it. He checked his internal chronometer. It was spinning wildly, unable to find a satellite sync. He looked into his internal storage, the gift of the valor. He found he could store the essence of his trailers, his weaponry, and even the vast Energon reserves he carried within a fold of space that felt as natural as his own spark. A ping appeared on his long-range scanners, a signature of high-frequency radiation, not Cybertronian, not magical, human. "The Infinity," Optimus murmured. He transformed, in a blur of mechanical genius. His body folded and shifted, plates sliding over pistons, wheels tucking and locking, until he became the iconic long-nosed truck. His tires gripped the loam of a world that had never seen a wheel so large or a machine so purposeful. He roared to life, his engine a low, protective growl that warned the gathering shadows to stay back. The meeting of legends at the crash site of the Infinity. The massive hangar doors groaned open, fighting against the buckled hull. The atmosphere that rushed in was breathable and shockingly pure. It tasted of nothing and everything. Master Chief stepped out onto the ramp. His Mjolnir armor was scuffed and void-blackened, the olive-drab plating holding the dust of a dozen dying worlds. Beside him, the weapon appeared on his palm projector, her form flickering slightly as she adjusted to the planet's unique energetic signature. "Chief, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and data saturation. "The star charts, they don't match. Not anywhere in the Milky Way, not anywhere in known slip space. And the energy readings, there's a field permeating the planet. It's not electromagnetic. It's like the planet has a pulse, a song." "Survivors?" Chief asked, his voice a gravelly calm that anchored the chaos. The Infinity is grounded, but the hull is holding. Captain Lasky is organizing a perimeter and damage control. But Chief, we aren't alone. I'm picking up a massive metallic signature approaching at high speed from the southwest. It's broadcasting an IFF signal on a frequency used by the old Titan-class colonists, but it's been modified. It says Optimus Prime. The Chief unholstered his MA-40 assault rifle, the familiar weight a comfort in an alien world. I've never heard of a Spartan named Optimus. That's because he's not a Spartan, Chief, the weapon replied, her eyes wide as she scanned the tree line. According to these readings, he's a god. The trees at the edge of the glacial valley parted. The massive truck roared into the clearing, kicking up a spray of snow and gravel. It didn't slow down, it accelerated, hit a rise, and leaped. Midair, the vehicle disintegrated and reformed a mechanical ballet of sliding plates and rotating joints until the 30-foot giant landed with a thud that shook the earth 20 yards from the Master Chief. The Spartans of Blue Team, emerging behind the Chief, raised their battle rifles. "Hold fire," Chief commanded, his hand raised. He looked up. His golden visor reflected the towering red and blue giant. Optimus Prime looked down at the small, armored soldier. He saw the scars on the Mjolnir armor, the weary but unbreakable stance of a man who had spent his entire life in the breach. He saw the Infinity behind him, a vessel of war, yet filled with souls seeking a home they had lost. Optimus retracted his battle mask, revealing a face that was both mechanical and deeply human in its expression of compassion. "Soldier of Earth," Optimus said, his voice echoing off the titanium hull of the ship. "I am Optimus Prime. I believe we have both been brought to this world by forces that seek to preserve life against a rising tide of darkness." Chief lowered his rifle, though he didn't holster it. He felt a strange sensation, a lack of the usual tactical tension he felt around unknowns. "Master Chief Petty Officer John 117. We're a long way from the Unsk Prime. Home is where the spark finds peace," Optimus replied, looking toward the south, where the sky seemed a shade darker, like a bruise on the horizon. "But peace is not what awaits us here. I have felt it. A shadow in the east. An eye that does not sleep. The shadow stirs in the lightless depths of Barad-dûr." The eye of Sauron shifted. The Dark Lord felt the ripple in the song. He had expected the movement of the One Ring. He had expected the meddling of Gandalf and the fading pride of men. He had not expected the arrival of two suns, one of cold, calculating steel and the other of warm, indomitable light. The power of the Infinity pulsed like a beacon of forbidden sorcery, a treasure of metal that could arm 1,000,000 orcs. The presence of the Prime was a wound in the darkness, a resonance of the old world that Sauron feared. But the Dark Lord did not feel fear for long. He felt a hunger. If these metal titans could be corrupted, if the fire of their sparks and engines could be harnessed, then the world of men, elves, and dwarves would not just fall, it would be erased from the music of time. He sent a thought-piercing, jagged shriek of will to Isengard. In the Tower of Orthanc, Saruman the White gasped, clutching his palantir. His knuckles bled against the stone. He saw the snow-covered valley. He saw the ship that dwarfed the mountains, a spear of black iron thrust into the heart of the north. He saw the giant in red and blue. "Wonders," Saruman whispered, his voice cracking with manic greed. "The Valar have sent toys, weapons of a lost age. I must have them. I must know the secret of the cold fire they carry. The ring is but a bauble compared to the power to command the stars." The Fellowship of Iron. Optimus Prime turned his attention back to the Master Chief. "The Valar, the guardians of this world, have granted us a gift," Optimus explained. He reached out, and a shimmering portal of golden light appeared in the air beside him. Inside was a glimpse of a vast, starlit void, calm and inviting. A space beyond space, to carry our burdens, our tools, and our strength, so that we may move through this world without crushing it under our weight. "This world is fragile, Master Chief. It is not built for the weight of our wars." The weapon's voice chirped in Chief's ear, sounding uncharacteristically excited. "Chief, my internal systems just updated. I have access to a subspace armory. I can literally dematerialize the Infinity's heavy ordnance and store it in a pocket dimension. We can take the ship's utility with us without moving 5 kilometers of metal across a forest. It's like the Foreigner's deep space storage, but it feels like it's made of light. We'll need it, Chief said. He looked at Optimus. What's the mission, Prime? Optimus Prime stood tall, the sun setting behind him, casting a halo of gold around his mechanical form. He looked like a statue of a god from a civilization that hadn't been born yet. We are to find a grey pilgrim, Optimus said, and a small being who carries the weight of the world in his pocket. The shadow moves to the Shire. We must get there before the 9 find what they seek. Then we move out, Chief said, turning to his Spartans. Load the Pelicans. We're going to the Shire. The prologue had ended. The Age of Iron had begun in the land of myth. As the first stars of Middle-earth, the jewels of Varda began to twinkle in the darkening sky. The rumble of a Cybertronian engine and the rhythmic hiss of Spartan boots on gravel marked the beginning of a fellowship the likes of which Arda had never seen. The Infinity began to shimmer, its massive bulk slowly dissolving into the golden storage dimension, leaving only a forward strike team, the Chief, a handful of Spartans, and the last Prime. Freedom, Optimus whispered as they began their trek south, his headlights cutting through the growing gloom, is the right of all sentient beings, even those who inhabit the smallest of holes in the ground. Chapter 01. The Grey Pilgrim and the Iron Giants. The Great East Road was a ribbon of ancient dust and sun-bleached stone winding through the rolling, emerald hills of Eriador. It was a land that breathed with a quiet, primeval rhythm, a place where the passage of time was measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the slow turning of the seasons and the lengthening of shadows over the downs. It was a world far removed from the grinding gears of industry, the neon hum of Cybertronian cities, or the cold, sterile vacuum of the Orion Arm. Gandalf the Grey sat atop his weathered wooden cart, his tall, pointed hat pulled low against the amber glare of the afternoon sun. He hummed a soft, wandering tune, a melody of old times and distant shores, but his eyes, sharp as a hawk's beneath his bushy, snow-white brows, were not fixed on the road. They were fixed on the sky. For 3 days, the heavens had felt brittle, as if the very air were a sheet of glass stretched to the point of shattering. The birds of the north had fallen into an unnatural silence, and the wind carried a strange, metallic tang, a scent of ozone and hyper-advanced alloys that had no business being in the Bree land. Gandalf, being of the Maiar, felt a tug at his spirit that most would miss. It was a dissonance in the music of the Aenir, a sudden, heavy, and rhythmic chord that had crashed into the harmony of Arda like a titan's footfall. Something has fallen, he whispered into the folds of his beard, his gnarled fingers tightening on his staff of gnarled ash. Something that neither man nor elf could devise, nor even the smiths of the Iron Hills could dream of. He reached the crest of a ridge overlooking the valley where the road turned toward the Shire. He intended to make for Hobbiton to see an old friend, but as his pony slowed, the wind shifted. It brought with it a low-frequency vibration, a hum so deep it shook the very stones beneath his cart and rattled the pipe weed in his pouch. It was the sound of a heartbeat, but one forged of pistons, fire, and a sentient lightning, the unfolding of fate from the deep shadow of a dense thicket of ancient elms. A shape emerged that defied every category of the natural world. It did not walk, it rolled upon wheels of black rubber the size of millstones. It was a massive vehicle of deep crimson and cobalt, its chrome grille gleaming like the polished visor of a High King's knight. It moved with a terrifying, heavy grace, its enormous weight barely disturbing the soft loam of the path, as if the earth itself were yielding to its presence. Behind it, emerging from a shimmering heat haze that tasted of exotic fuel, were smaller, olive-drab shapes, armored chariots that flew without wings, humming with the sound of 1,000 angry hornets. Gandalf stood in his cart, his tall frame casting a long shadow. He raised his staff, and the crystal atop it began to glow with a faint, warning light, a white fire that sensed a power unlike anything since the elder days. "Uru, protect us," he breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Is this the weaponry of the enemy?" Has Saruman delved too deep into the dark arts of the machine, or has the spirit of Morgoth returned in a skin of iron? The red truck slowed, its engine breaking with a sound like a great, metallic beast sighing in the heat. Then the world seemed to warp. In a display of geometry that defied every physical law of Middle-earth, the vehicle began to unfold. Plates of reinforced metal slid over one another with a rhythmic shik-shik-shik. Gears sang a mechanical aria of precision, and within seconds, the truck was gone. In its place stood a giant. He was 30 feet tall, a colossus of iron and sapphire light. His armor bore the scars of 1,000,000 battles, yet he stood with a nobility that rivaled the lords of Gondor. His eyes were not the burning, hateful red of the lidless eye, but a deep, compassionate blue, the color of the sky after a long-awaited rain. "Do not be afraid, Mithrandir," the giant spoke. His voice was a tectonic rumble, a sound that seemed to come from the very foundations of the mountains, yet it possessed a profound kindness that bypassed the wizard's defensive spells and settled in his heart like a warm half-fire. Gandalf blinked, his staff's light flickering as he lowered it. "You know my name, Master Wood Giant? Or are you a spirit of the Forge, sent by Orla himself to aid us in our hour of need?" "I am Optimus Prime," the Titan replied. He knelt, the massive joints of his legs hissing with steam, bringing his head level with the hill crest so he could look the wizard in the eye. "I am a traveler of the stars, brought here by a power that seeks to safeguard this realm from a shadow I know all too well. I come not as a conqueror, but as a shield for those who cannot defend themselves." From the shadow of the giant's massive leg, a smaller figure stepped forward. He was barely 7 feet tall, a giant to a hobbit, but a mere child compared to the Prime, yet he carried a presence that felt as heavy as a mountain range. He was clad in armor the color of a forest at dusk, with a golden visor that revealed nothing of the face beneath. In his gloved hands, he held a black, metallic device and a Mayforted assault rifle, a weapon of such terrible precision that Gandalf felt the lethality radiating from it like heat from a forge. "And I am Master Chief," the soldier said. His voice was a steady, gravelly calm, the voice of a man who had seen the end of the world and decided he wasn't finished yet. "We're looking for a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. And we're looking for you, Gandalf." Gandalf sat back down on his wooden bench, his pipe unlit and forgotten. He looked at the massive ship, the Unsk Infinity, which was currently being phased into a shimmering pocket of golden air by a flickering, translucent blue spirit woman appearing on the soldier's shoulder. "The Valar have indeed been busy," Gandalf muttered, a wry, tired smile finally touching his lips. "You speak of hobbits and shadows, Star Traveler. It seems the board is set, and the pieces are moving, though I must admit, I did not expect the pieces to be made of star metal and light." A council of 2 worlds, the group moved off the main road, seeking the cover of a deep, wooded dell near the Midgewater marshes to avoid the prying eyes of any stray rangers or spies of the enemy. The Master Chief did not rest. He moved with a mechanical efficiency, deploying his Spartans Fred 104, Kelly 087, and Linda 058 to the perimeter. They were shadowy figures in the twilight, their Mjolnir armor blending into the foliage as they set up a sensor network that spanned miles. Their movements were silent, their internal HUDs scanning the electromagnetic spectrum for anything that didn't belong to the natural world. Optimus Prime sat against a jagged cliff face, his massive frame blending into the rock like a monument of an older age. "The darkness I feel in this air is not merely physical," Optimus observed, his internal sensors analyzing the ambient magical ley lines that crisscrossed Middle-earth. "It is a corruption of the spirit. It reminds me of the dark energon that once plagued my home, a hunger that consumes all it touches, leaving only ash and malice." "You feel the reach of Sauron," Gandalf said, finally managing to light his pipe. The sweet scent of Longbottom leaf drifted up, forming the shape of a small, glowing ring in the air before the wizard swiped it away with a grimace. "He is a shadow that has endured for ages. He seeks a trinket, a ring of power that is currently held by a very dear, very oblivious friend of mine in the Shire." Master Chief stood by the fire, his golden visor reflecting the flames. The weapon flickered into existence on his palm projector, her blue light contrasting with the orange embers. If this ring is a high-value asset, Chief said, his tactical mind already running 100 simulations, the enemy won't just send scouts. They'll send an extraction team. My motion trackers are picking up thermal anomalies to the east. Cold signatures. They're moving fast, and they're not following the roads. Gandalf's expression darkened, the lines on his face deepening until he looked older than the hills themselves. The Nazgul, the Nine, they are neither living nor dead, Chief. They are the shadows of men who fell to the ring's law. They see when we are blind, and their breath is a mortal poison. They will not stop, and they cannot be killed by any ordinary means of this world. I have faced many who claim to be immortal, Optimus said, his hand resting on the hilt of a glowing orange ion blade stored in his subspace manifold. None have survived the light of a prime, but our priority is the Shire. If these 9 reach the hobbits first, the cost will be too high. We cannot allow this world to suffer the fate of Cybertron. The weapon chirped, her holographic form expanding to show a 3D topographical map of the Shire. Gandalf, I've analyzed the atmospheric density and the local terrain. If we use the Infinity's pelicans to transport everyone, we'll alert every bird, beast, and crebain within 50 miles. But if the Chief and Optimus move overland through the North Downs, we can be in Hobbiton by nightfall tomorrow. I can use the Valor's spatial storage to leapfrog supplies and heavier ordnance ahead of us. Gandalf looked at the AI with genuine wonder. A lady of light who lives within a box. Truly, the wonders of the future are as strange as the myths of the past. Very well, we shall travel to the Shire. I shall go ahead on my cart to keep up the appearance of a wandering wizard and to warn young Frodo. You, my giant friends, must stay to the shadows of the woods. If a 30-foot metal man walks into the Green Dragon, I fear the gaffer might have a heart attack. Understood, Chief said. He looked at Optimus. Prime, you take the high ground and provide long-range overwatch. My team will handle the low-visibility routes and flanking maneuvers. We stay dark until the engagement begins. The trek through the North Downs as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, bruised shadows across the hills. The journey began in earnest. It was a sight that would have driven any common man of the Third Age to madness. A grey wizard in a pony-drawn cart, followed at a distance by a silent, armoured titan and a squad of super soldiers who moved like ghosts through the underbrush. They passed the borders of the Shire under the cover of a moonless night. To the hobbits, the world was a small, cosy place of gardens, ale, and gossip. They had no idea that the vanguard of 2 different universes had just crossed their threshold. Optimus Prime walked with his heavy footfalls muffled by a dampening field the weapon had calibrated for his massive frame. He looked down at the small, round-doored holes in the hillsides, the smiles of the hobbits. He saw the smoke rising from chimneys and heard the faint, distant sound of laughter from a tavern in the village of Waymeet. Such a fragile piece, Optimus whispered to the Chief via their encrypted internal comms. It reminds me of the golden age of Iakan, before the High Council fell, before the greed for power turned brother against brother. There is a purity here, John 117. It must be protected. Peace is usually fragile, Prime, Chief replied. He was currently crouched on a ridge. His S7 sniper rifle scanned the horizon in the infrared spectrum. That's why we're here, to make sure it doesn't break, or to pick up the pieces if it does. Gandalf, leading the way in his cart, felt a surge of hope he hadn't felt since the White Council last met. He had spent decades worrying about the waning strength of men and the departure of the elves. But now, looking at the 2 icons of iron and indomitable will behind him, he felt as if the very stars had descended to fight for Middle-earth. Just a bit further, Gandalf called back softly, the lights of Hobbiton appearing in the distance like fallen stars. Around this bend, and we shall see the hill of Bag End. It is time for a birthday party. And, I suspect, the beginning of a very long walk. The shriek in the dark, but as they approached the outskirts of the village, the Chief's motion tracker flared a violent, pulsing red. Contact, Chief barked over the comms. Multiple targets. Northeast. They are not hobbits. They're fast, and they're radiating extreme cold sub-zero temperatures. Optimus Prime's battle mask slid into place with a sharp, lethal clink. His sapphire eyes burned with a fierce, ancient light, and his ion blasters hummed to life, the barrels glowing with a lethal orange hue. "The 9 have arrived," Optimus said, his voice dropping an octave into a battle register. "Master Chief, secure the wizard and the hobbit. I will draw their attention." In the distance, a long, curdling shriek tore through the night air, sound of such pure, unadulterated malice that the trees themselves seemed to wither and the grass beneath the chief's boots turned to frost. It was a sound that didn't just hit the ears, it clawed at the soul. The Nazgul had found the scent. They moved like shadows on horseback, their black robes billowing in a wind that followed only them. They expected to find a frightened hobbit and perhaps an old man. They did not expect to find a wall of Mjolnir-clad Spartans. They did not expect to find a Cybertronian prime. "Weapon status," Chief ordered, his thumb flipping the safety on his rifle. "I'm detecting a massive localized distortion in the local magic field, Chief," the AI replied, her voice tight. "The Nazgul are projecting an aura of fear. It's a psychological weapon, but good news, your neural interface is filtering it out. You're not afraid, Chief." "I never was," Chief replied. The hunt for the ring had begun, but the hunters were about to find that the Shire was no longer undefended. The Age of Iron was no longer a prophecy. It was standing in their path, loaded and ready. As the first Black Rider crested the hill, his red eyes glowing beneath his cowl, he didn't see a hobbit. He saw the golden visor of the Master Chief. "Target acquired," Chief whispered. The first shot echoed through the Shire like a thunderclap, and the war for the ring was changed forever. Chapter 02. The Watchers in the Wheel. The moon over the Shire was a pale, silver sickle, hanging suspended in a sky so clear it looked like polished obsidian. It cast long, rhythmic shadows across the rolling downs, where the grass rippled in the night breeze like a sea of velvet. To any hobbit peering out of a round, yellow-lit window, the night was merely crisp and quiet, a perfect evening for a second supper and a warm hearth. But beneath the surface of that pastoral peace, the atmosphere was thick with a tension that only those attuned to the higher frequencies of existence could perceive. The very air felt ionized, charged with the static of a brewing storm that had no clouds to call its own. Gandalf the Grey continued his slow approach toward Hobbiton. His cart creaked under the weight of flamboyant fireworks and a destiny far heavier than any black powder rocket. His eyes were fixed forward, yet his mind was anchored 3 miles behind him, near the tangled eaves of the Bine Bowl Woods. There, where the forest met the northern marshes, the iron giants kept their vigil. He could still feel the resonance of them humming in his teeth, a vibration in the song of ardor. They were anomalies, jagged tears in the tapestry of the world, yet they carried a light that felt ancient, even to a mayor. "Sleep well, Shire," Gandalf whispered, his voice caught in the wind, "for your guardians tonight are not of this earth, and their mercy is reserved only for the innocent." The Spartans' vigil high above the winding road, Master Chief stood motionless on a jagged outcropping of limestone. To the naked eye, he was a ghost, a mere distortion in the moonlight. His Mjolnir Gen 3 armor had engaged its active camouflage, a shimmering veil of light-bending polygons that made his massive, 2-ton frame nearly indistinguishable from the grey rock and dark moss. Through his golden visor, the world was not a landscape of shadows, but a high-fidelity tapestry of tactical data. The HUD heads-up display was a masterpiece of information management. Thermal plumes from distant hobbit chimneys glowed in soft oranges. The rhythmic pulse of local wildlife, rabbits and badgers, appeared as small, green blips. Even the shifting wind currents were mapped in real time, blue vectors showing the scent drift of the valley. "Chief," the weapon's voice whispered directly into his neural interface. Her voice carried a crisp, digital clarity that contrasted sharply with the ancient rustle of the woods. "I'm tracking the anomaly again. It's difficult to quantify. My sensors are crying foul," explain, John 117 replied. His voice was a low, disciplined rasp, barely a breath against the comms. The signal from the east, it isn't just a heat sink. It's a vacuum, a localized state of entropy. Whatever those 9 are, they aren't just invisible to the naked eye. They are a rejection of standard physics. They don't reflect radar. They don't emit a standard thermal signature. They consume energy. It's like trying to track a hole in reality. Keep the multispectral sweep active, Chief ordered. He shifted his grip on his MA-40 assault rifle, his finger resting precisely alongside the trigger guard. He had fought the Covenant's religious zealotry, the Flood's biological nightmare, and the Banished's brutal industrialism, but this was a foe that smelled of ancient graves and forgotten despairs. It was a war of the soul, and he was a man of titanium and bone. I'm detecting a residue now, the weapon continued, her holographic avatar flickering briefly on his internal reticle, clinging to the tall grass in the marshes. On the ultraviolet spectrum, it looks like black smoke, but it's heavy viscous. It's acidic, Chief. It's killing the plant life on a cellular level just by being near it. If they reach the village, the ground won't recover for a century. Not on my watch, Chief said. The meditation of the Prime below the ridge, tucked into a deep, shadow-choked ravine carved by an ancient, nameless stream, Optimus Prime sat in a state of meditative stasis. His massive, 30-foot mechanical form was as silent as the stones. To minimize his profile, he had deactivated his primary internal combustion systems, switching to a silent, electrical hum powered by the matrix of leadership. Within his spark, he felt the Valor's gift, the infinite spatial dimension storage. It was a vast, silent cathedral of golden light attached to his very soul. Within that pocket of non-space, the Unsk infinity lay anchored. The massive ship was a hive of activity. Inside the fold, thousands of technicians and Spartans worked in a temporal bubble to repair the slip-space drive and mend the buckled hull. Optimus could feel the ship's pulse, a thrum of human ingenuity and desperation resting safely within his own essence. Optimus opened his optics. The sapphire glow illuminated the damp walls of the ravine, turning the dripping water into falling diamonds. He looked up, sensing the Master Chief's presence on the ridge, a sentinel of iron will. The burden of the Protector is heavy, Optimus thought, his processors whirring with a deep, melodic resonance. This world is so young, so fragile. Its people live in a dream of summer, unaware that the winter of an age is at their doorstep. He reached out with his sensory array, not searching for heat or motion, but for the frequency of the world. He felt the great song, the underlying harmony that Gandalf had spoken of. But there was a discordance, a screeching, jagged note that signaled the approach of the Nazgul. To Optimus, the Ringwraiths were not just monsters. They were corrupted files, malware in the master program of creation, seeking to overwrite beauty with a void. Master Chief, Optimus's voice came through the encrypted Unsk channel, vibrating with the authority of a king. The shadow is circling. They feel the presence of the One, but they also feel us. Our arrival has rippled through the fabric of this reality like a stone cast into a still pool. We are the anomaly they cannot ignore. I see them, Optimus. Chief responded. 3 contacts. Crossing the Brandywine Bridge. They're moving with purpose. They aren't searching anymore, they're hunting. Then we must be the shield, Optimus said. In a movement that was impossibly fluid for a being of his mass, Optimus began to transform. It was a symphony of mechanical precision. Plates of cobalt armor retracted, tires rotated into hidden housings, and his massive frame compressed. But he did not become a truck, not here, in the dense, tangled weald. Under the influence of the Valor's grace, he shifted into a stalker mode, a sleeker, more predatory shape that resembled a massive, metallic panther of silver and blue. His paws were wide, multi-jointed stabilizers designed to move through the forest without snapping a single branch. The encounter at the edge of the world. The three Nazgul paused at the edge of a thicket, their black steeds frothing with a supernatural terror that no whip could command. The horses rolled their eyes, catching the scent of something that should not exist, the smell of a dying star and cold, processed iron. The cloaked figures hissed to one another, sound like metal scraping on bone, or wind whistling through a ribcage. They felt the new power in the air. It wasn't the white fire of the elven lords, which burned with a familiar, ancient light. This was different. It was hard, unyielding, and silent. One of the nine, a lieutenant of the Witch King, raised a gauntleted hand. He pointed toward the hills. To the wraith's spectral sight, the world of the living was a grey fog. Usually, mortals were flickering candles in that mist. But there, on the ridge, was a pillar of emerald light. It was solid, impenetrable, and cold. The Master Chief's soul was not a candle, it was a forge fire encased in a shell of dead metal that their terrors could not pierce. And below him was something that made the wraiths recoil, a great light, a golden, pulsing sun that resided within a body of silver. The matrix of leadership burned in the darkness like a star fallen to earth. The Nazgul shrieked a piercing, soul-tearing cry that echoed across the water, curdling the milk in the farmhouses of Woodhall. Master Chief didn't flinch. His brain, augmented by the Spartan Roman 2 program and shielded by the Mjolnir internal field dampeners, processed the shriek as a simple audio hazard. A high-decibel warning flashed on his HUD, and his internal speakers automatically leveled the sound to a manageable drone. "Weapon," Chief said, his voice as cold as the armor he wore. "Targeting. Locking on," she replied, her voice tightening. "Chief, their cloaks are just physical anchors. They're using them to interact with the material world. If you want to stop them, you have to disrupt the anchor or the spirit. My suggestion? High-velocity armor-piercing rounds. Let's see how immortal they are when their physical shells are shredded by 7.62 mm tungsten." "Not yet," Chief cautioned. "We don't know what a hot engagement does to the local geography. Gandalf wants them drawn away from the village. We provide the distraction." Chief stood up, deactivating his active camo for a calculated split second. The moonlight caught the golden sun glint of his visor, deliberate, defiant flash to the creatures of the dark. The Nazgul reacted instantly. They turned their horses, spurred by a hatred for the new light that the Spartan represented. They charged toward the ridge, their blades of Morgul steel drawn. The metal glowed with a faint, sickly green light, weeping a poison that sought to infect the very air. As the wraiths galloped into the clearing at the base of the ridge, the ground itself seemed to rise to meet them. Optimus Prime, in his silver panther form, lunged from the shadows. He didn't use a blade, he used his sheer, unrelenting mass. He struck the lead Nazgul's horse with the force of a falling meteor. The animal didn't just fall, it disintegrated into mist and shadow, its physical form unable to withstand the kinetic energy of a Cybertronian strike. The wraith was flung into an ancient oak with a force that shattered the trunk. Optimus skidded to a halt, his form shifting back into his towering humanoid stance in a blur of rotating gears and sliding plates. He stood between the nine and the path to Hobbiton, a wall of living metal. "You shall go no further," Optimus proclaimed. His voice didn't just carry through the air, it vibrated in the earth, a command that felt as old as the mountains. "This land is under the protection of the free peoples and the light of the primes." The two remaining Nazgul recoiled, their horses rearing in a frenzy of fear. They had never seen a being like this, a giant of metal that spoke with the resonance of a god. They felt the matrix within Optimus's chest, a concentrated essence of pure, primordial light. To them, it was like staring into the heart of a sun that refused to set. From the ridge above, a series of muffled thuds rang out. Thump, thump, thump. Master Chief was firing. He wasn't aiming for the wraiths, not yet. He was using a suppressed M6K sidekick, firing precision shots at the ground inches from the wraith's feet. Each bullet, traveling at supersonic speeds, kicked up a spray of dirt and rock, creating a barrier of kinetic force. "Weapon status," Chief asked, leapfrogging down the rocks with the effortless agility of a mountain lion, his thrusters giving him short bursts of controlled descent. They're confused, Chief. Their fear aura is bouncing right off your Mjolnir plating. There's no neurochemical hook for them to grab onto. And Optimus, well, he's basically a walking holy relic. They don't know how to fight something they can't intimidate. The Nazgul, realizing they were outmatched in a direct physical confrontation with these titans of iron, dissolved into the shadows. They did not flee out of cowardice, but out of a cold, calculated need to report to Barad-dûr. Their shrieks faded into the distance, a lingering stain on the night air. The silent guardians Optimus Prime stood in the center of the clearing, his optics dimming as he lowered his primary combat systems. He looked up at the Master Chief, who had landed softly 10 yards away, his rifle held at the low ready. "They are gone," Optimus said, his voice returning to its melodic, cello-like tone. "For now, but they will return with greater numbers. Sauron will not let such a glitch in his plan go unanswered. He will seek to understand the nature of the steel that defies him." "We'll be ready," Chief said. He looked toward the flickering, distant lights of Hobbiton, where the first chimneys were beginning to smoke for breakfast. "Gandalf should be at Bag End by now. We need to establish a perimeter. The weapon, can you link with the Infinity's localized sensor grid?" "I'm already on it, Chief. I've deployed a series of cloaked sensor pylons around the borders of the Shire. If a blade of grass bends the wrong way, we'll know about it. I've also modified the UNSC cloaking algorithms with Optimus's Cybertronian encryption. Even the Palantir shouldn't be able to see through this." Optimus Prime knelt, his hand resting briefly on the lush green grass of the Shire. He felt the life beneath the soil, the worms, the roots, the sleeping hobbits. "Master Chief, do you feel it? The life here. It is so quiet, so pure. It is a world that has forgotten the meaning of war as we know it. It is worth every ounce of our strength to ensure it stays that way." Chief looked at his armored hand, then at the horizon where the first hint of gold was beginning to bleed into the sky. "I've spent my life protecting people who didn't even know I existed, Prime. This isn't any different. It's just a different sky." Optimus nodded, a mechanical hum of approval. "Then let us set the watch. The long-expected party begins tonight, and we shall be the silent guardians of the night." As the first light of dawn began to kiss the hills of the Shire, the two legends faded back into the deep greens of the woods. A giant of blue and red, and a soldier of green and gold, two remnants of broken worlds, standing as the first and last line of defense for a world that had no idea how close it was to the end. The prologue was over. The Age of Iron and Grace had truly begun. Chapter 03. The shadows of the hill. The morning sun rose over the Shire not with a roar, but with a gentle, golden sigh. It crept over the thatched roofs of Waymeet, burnished the weather vanes of Hobbiton to a brilliant copper, and sparkled off the dew-heavy fields of the Westfarthing. For the hobbits, it was the dawn of the most anticipated day in a generation, Bilbo Baggins's 111th birthday. The air was already thick and sweet, a heady cocktail of baking honey cakes, roasting meats, and the deep, earthy aroma of old Toby pipeweed drifting from 100 chimneys. But for the watchers in the woods, the morning held a different, more analytical hue. Deep within the ancient, gnarled roots of a chestnut grove overlooking the water, a ripple appeared in the air, shimmering distortion like heat rising from a summer road, or the surface of a pond disturbed by a phantom stone. From this golden fold, in reality a subspace pocket provided by the grace of the valor, the Master Chief stepped into the physical world. His Mjolnir Gen 3 armor, usually a vibrant olive drab that spoke of industrial warfare, was currently matted with a non-reflective, photonic-absorbent coating. The emerald plating seemed to swallow the soft, ambient light of the Shire, rendering him a silhouette of shadow against the vibrant green of the moss. His golden visor, a sliver of fire in the dim grove, scanned the horizon with a cold, machine-like efficiency. Beside him, a much larger distortion began to unfurl. Optimus Prime did not emerge all at once. He materialized in sections. His massive tires, chrome-plated chassis, and cobalt blue pauldrons phasing into existence. To an observer, it would have looked like a titan being woven out of starlight and heavier industry. He stood silent, his internal cooling fan spinning at a whisper-quiet RPM, his sapphire optics dimmed to a soft, contemplative glow. "The weapon status on the perimeter," Chief said. His voice was a low-frequency vibration that barely traveled 5 feet, transmitted through a localized acoustic dampening field. The blue holographic form of the weapon flickered onto his palm projector. She looked out over the idyllic landscape, her digital features softened by an expression of profound, almost wistful curiosity. "It's peaceful, Chief. It's almost unsettling," she whispered. "My sensors are picking up 0 high-yield energy signatures. No radiation, no industrial pollutants, no slip space ruptures. Just organic life. It's like a pre-colonization Earth colony, but more intentional." "But Chief, look at the hill." She projected a wireframe map of Bag End onto his HUD. "The structural density of that hobbit hole is normal, but there's a localized gravitational anomaly right in the center. It's small, barely the size of a coin, but it has a mass signature that defies standard physics. It's a singularity of intent, Chief. The void I told you about." "The ring." Optimus Prime knelt, his massive hand, each finger the size of a hobbit's torso, resting lightly on the earth. He didn't just see the Shire, he felt it. Through his connection to the matrix of leadership, he felt the vibration of the world, the tiny, frantic feet of hobbits running to and fro with streamers, the joyous laughter of children, and the underlying, steady, ancient heartbeat of ardor. "It is a paradox," Optimus whispered, his voice resonating with the depth of a temple bell. "Such profound innocence, anchored to such a profound darkness. Gandalf is right to be cautious. The shadow that seeks this place is not merely looking for a weapon of war, it is looking to extinguish the very light that makes this Shire possible. It is a hunger that cannot be sated by conquest alone." The tactical net on the road below, Gandalf's cart rattled along, a modest wooden vessel carrying the weight of the world's hope. He was currently surrounded by a swarm of cheering hobbit children, their hairy feet kicking up dust as he set off small, sparkling squibs that took the shape of iridescent butterflies and silver birds. To the children, he was just old Gandalf, the purveyor of magic and the bringer of the best fireworks in the Westfarthing. But as he turned the bend toward the hill, Gandalf's eyes sharp and grey as a storm flickered toward the woods. He saw nothing. The Spartans and the Prime were masters of the unseen, blending advanced cloaking with the natural camouflage of the wild. But he felt them. He felt the cold, disciplined resolve of the Master Chief, a soldier whose spirit was like a honed blade of Westerness. And he felt the presence of Optimus, a soul so vast, so heavy with the history of a dead world, that it felt as if a mountain had decided to watch over his shoulder. Gandalf pulled his cart to a halt at the gate of Bag End. Bilbo Baggins was already there, his face a map of joy, anxiety, and the strange, lingering weariness that comes from carrying a burden for 60 years. "Gandalf, my dear Gandalf," the old hobbit cried, hobbling down the path with a vigor that seemed borrowed. "Bilbo," Gandalf laughed, though his heart was heavy. He could feel the anomaly the weapon had described. It was a cold spot in the warm morning air. As they entered the cozy, circular warmth of the hobbit hole, the watchers shifted their positions. Master Chief signaled his Spartan fireteam Blue Team via their internal battle net. They had been deployed in a wide cloverleaf pattern around Hobbiton, their sensors linked to the Unsk Infinity's tactical suite, which remained tucked safely in the spatial fold, monitoring the planet from its golden cage. "Blue Team, report," Chief commanded. "North perimeter clear." Linda 058 voice crackled in his ear. She was perched atop the highest branch of a massive oak on the edge of the Bindbowl Woods, her SRS-99 S5 sniper rifle resting on a bipod. Her scope wasn't looking for orcs, it was scanning the ultraviolet and infrared spectrums for the spectral cold spots that heralded the Nazgul. "I've got eyes on the party tree. Tents are up. No sign of the 9, just a lot of very excited gardeners. Southeast is quiet." Kelly-087 reported, her speed augmented form a mere blur as she patrolled the stone walls and hedgerows. The locals are well, they're eating, Chief. I've counted 6 full meals per person since sunrise. These people are professional consumers. If the Covenant had invaded the Shire, they would have been eaten out of house and home in a week. Fred 104, positioned near the Brandywine Bridge, added his input. Thermal signatures are stable. I'm picking up a few rangers on the outskirts, but they are friendly. Gandalf's Dunedain, they're good, but they don't see us. Optimus Prime remained in the deep shadows of the Chestnut Grove, his systems in a state of hypervigilance. He was not just watching for physical threats. Using his internal matrix link, he was attempting to bridge the gap between his Cybertronian technology and the music of this world. Optimus, the weapon's voice came through his comms. I've been analyzing the atmospheric data. There's a resonance here. The trees, they react to the way the hobbits sing. It's not just acoustics. It's like the planet is a biological hard drive, and the songs are the data entry. The very soil remembers. Indeed, Optimus replied, his processors humming. On my world, we were built from the ground up, children of metal, logic, and the all-spark. But here, the world was sung into being. The music of the Aena still echoes in the wind, in the rustle of the leaves. We must be careful, weapon. Our very presence is a new, mechanical chord in that song. We must ensure it is a harmony, not a discordance. The long-expected party as evening approached, the Shire began to glow with a festive fire. Thousands of lanterns were lit, hanging from the branches of the party tree like fallen stars. The music of fiddles and flutes rose into the air, accompanied by the rhythmic thumping of dancing feet on the packed earth. From his vantage point, Optimus saw the festivities unfold. He watched the hobbits, beings who had no concept of Decepticons or interstellar war, celebrating the simple act of existing. He saw Bilbo Baggins stand on a chair, preparing to give his speech. The giant of Cybertron felt a strange pang of kinship for the small hobbit. Bilbo was a creature of 2 worlds, the comfortable, predictable Shire and the wild, dangerous world of dragons, stone giants, and gold. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like. Bilbo's voice carried through the crisp night air, amplified by the natural bow of the hill, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Optimus tilted his head, his mechanical gears clicking softly. A curious sentiment, blunt, yet filled with a strange, weary affection. He is saying goodbye, Chief. The weapon's voice suddenly turned sharp, losing its whimsy. The anomaly is spiking. Gravity is warping. The ring it's being primed. In a flash of golden light that was invisible to the hobbits but screamed like a distress flare on the Spartan sensors, Bilbo Baggins vanished. To the hobbits, it was a magic trick. To the Master Chief, it was a breach in reality. Target lost, Linda called out from her perch. Thermal signature gone. Acoustic tracking null. He's shifted out of phase space. No, Optimus said, his voice dropping into a dangerous battle register. He has stepped into the Wraith world, the realm where the shadow dwells. He is a beacon now. The 9 will have felt that. The breach at the door inside the circular hall of Bag End. The air grew heavy. Gandalf's frustration with Bilbo's antics boiled over into a display of the power he usually kept hidden. The shadows in the room lengthened and twisted, the wizard's voice becoming a thunderous boom that shook the very foundations of the hill. Outside, the Master Chief moved. He didn't wait for orders. He sprinted toward the back entrance of Bag End, his Mjolnir servos hissing as he leaped over a 5-foot stone wall with the grace of a predatory cat. He reached the round door just as Bilbo, still invisible and panicked, was attempting to slip away into the night. The hobbit, feeling the terrifying weight of the ring's sight upon him, bumped into something that felt like a wall of warm, vibrating ceramic. Oof! Bilbo gasped, falling back onto his haunches. He pulled the ring off his finger, his hand shaking, and the world rushed back into focus. He looked up, his eyes widening until they were as large as saucers. Standing in the doorway of his own home was a green-clad giant. The moonlight hit the golden visor, reflecting Bilbo's own terrified, small face back at him. "Mister," Baggins, Master Chief said. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man who had spent 40 years killing monsters, but it carried the weight of an unbreakable command. You should go back inside. The road ahead is more dangerous than your stories suggest. Bilbo trembled, looking from the Spartan's armored chest to the tall, shadowed figure of Gandalf looming in the hallway behind him. Who are you? Another wizard? A king from the south in strange armor? Bilbo squeaked, clutching his traveling cloak. A friend, a new voice boomed. Optimus Prime stepped partially out of the grove, his upper torso visible above the garden fence. The moonlight caught the crimson of his chest plates and the silver of his facial mask. Even in the dim light, he looked like a god of the stars, a celestial guardian made of iron and grace. Bilbo dropped his walking stick. Oh my, I think I've had quite enough adventure for one lifetime. I was going to see the mountains, but I think the mountains have come to see me. The adventure is just beginning, Bilbo, Gandalf said, stepping forward and laying a firm, fatherly hand on the hobbit's shoulder. He looked at the chief and then up at Optimus, his eyes conveying a silent, desperate gratitude. The ring is past. It goes to Frodo, but the enemy knows it is here now. The strike was felt. We must move. Now. The Master Chief nodded, his HUD updating with a flurry of tactical data. Extraction plan is ready. Blue team is collapsing the perimeter to escort the primary asset Frodo to the rendezvous point at Bree. We'll leapfrog the route to ensure the Nine don't cut him off. Optimus Prime looked up at the stars, the same stars that looked down on the ruins of Cybertron and the scattered colonies of the Unsk. The Fellowship has not yet formed in the halls of men or elves, he mused, but the shield of iron is already in place. As the hobbits of the Shire continued to dance, drink, and wonder where Mad Baggins had gone, they remained blissfully unaware that the fate of their world had just been placed in the collective hands of a wizard, a Spartan, and a Prime. The shadows of the hill grew long, stretching toward the east where the eye was turning. The chapter of the Shire was closing, and the long, hard road to Bree lay ahead, a road where the cold, logical steel of the 26th century and the ancient, spiritual fire of the Primes would meet the primal darkness of the Nine head-on. Freedom, Optimus whispered as the group prepared to vanish into the night, is a heavy burden to carry. But it is the only one worth the wait. Moving out, Chief added, his armor blending once more into the dark. The hunt was on. Chapter 04, The Protocol of the Ring. The transition from the jubilant, fireworks-lit atmosphere of the long-expected party to the suffocating silence of Bag End was jarring, even for a Spartan. The interior of the Hobbit hole was a sanctuary of warm mahogany, yellow parchment, and the lingering, sweet scent of Bilbo's birthday cake. However, for John 117, it was a tactical nightmare. The Master Chief stood in the center of the foyer, his helmet brushing the curved, wooden beams of the ceiling. To his augmented eyes and sophisticated senses, the house was a labyrinth of organic curves and blind corners. To his warrior's instinct, it was a confined box with far too many fatal choke points. He had engaged his armor's localized kinetic dampeners, deliberately distributing his half-done weight so as not to shatter the intricate hardwood floors with every step. Gandalf the Grey sat at the heavier oak dining table, his long, weathered fingers trembling slightly as he held a sealed envelope over a low-burning tallow candle. The wax seal glinted in the dim light. He did not look up at the chief, but he spoke with a voice that cut through the silence like a sharpened blade. "You are a man of war, Master Chief," Gandalf murmured, the candlelight casting deep, sorrowful shadows across the crags of his ancient face. "You have seen the fall of worlds. You have stood against the tide of armies. But tell me, soldier of the stars, have you ever seen a world fall to a whisper?" The chief shifted his weight, his Mjolnir servos issuing a microscopic hiss. He turned his golden, polarized visor toward the wizard. Frodo Baggins sat across from Gandalf, looking pale and impossibly small, his eyes darting nervously between the grey pilgrim and the towering, emerald-armoured giant in his hallway. "I've seen the flood, Gandalf," Chief replied, his voice a low, disciplined rasp that resonated with the grim weight of experience. "I've seen a biological parasite consume the mind of every living thing in a star system, turning friends into nightmares. I've spoken to the Gravemind, a consciousness built from the corpses of billions. Is this ring a biological threat? A cognitive virus? Worse," a clear, digital voice interjected. The blue holographic form of the weapon flickered into existence, projecting from the chief's gauntlet to stand upon the center of the dining table. Her azure light danced off Bilbo's polished silver spoons and illuminated the dusty spines of old maps. She was staring at the envelope with an expression of profound, clinical terror. "Chief, I've been running a deep spectrum analysis on the object inside that paper," the weapon explained, her avatar pacing nervously around the envelope. "It defies every law of thermodynamics and quantum mechanics in my database. It's not just gold. It's dense, impossibly so. The mass-to-volume ratio is fluctuating. But that's not the worst part." She expanded her hands, projecting a real-time, holographic graph of undulating crimson waves over the table. "It's emitting a low-frequency pulse," she continued, looking up at the Spartan. "It mimics the delta waves of a sleeping, sentient brain. It isn't just an object, Chief. It's a localized singularity of malice. It's actively trying to establish a neural link with anyone in a 3-meter radius. It's probing my subroutines, looking for organic weaknesses, desires, ambitions. It's trying to hack us, but through our souls, not our software. It is the will of its master," Gandalf said softly, his eyes sharpening as he looked at the glowing blue AI. "It is a piece of Sauron himself, poured into a vessel of gold. It seeks to return to him, and it will corrupt any who dare to touch it. It feeds on mere ambition of the strong and the fears of the weak." Outside the round, multi-paned window, a massive shadow shifted, momentarily plunging the room into deeper darkness. Optimus Prime remained in the garden, careful not to crush the prize-winning cabbages. He was resting on his knees, his massive, silver-plated face leveled with the window frame. He was so large that he blocked out the pale light of the moon, his sapphire optics glowing like twin, benevolent stars in the dark. "Then it is a spark of pure malice," Optimus's voice rumbled. The deep, cello-like frequency vibrated the glass panes and rattled the teacups on their saucers. "On my world, Cybertron, we possess the matrix of leadership, a vessel of accumulated wisdom, compassion, and the primordial light of our Creator. It empowers those who carry it to serve others. This ring, it is the matrix's absolute inverse. It is a vessel of chains." Optimus paused, his optics focusing on the small, trembling form of Frodo Baggins. "Freedom is the right of all sentient beings, Gandalf. To bind another's will to your own is the gravest of sins. This object is the ultimate denial of that right. It must be destroyed. Destroyed it must be," Gandalf agreed, leaning back in his wooden chair. "But not here. The fires of a blacksmith's forge cannot melt it. The weapons of your infinity, mighty as they are, would likely only shatter the ground beneath it. It can only be made in the fires of Mount Doom, deep within the heart of the enemy's own land." The tactical planning moved with the ruthless efficiency of a 26th century military briefing, seamlessly blended with the ancient lore of Middle-earth. Using the gift of the Valor, the infinite spatial dimension storage, the weapon began to coordinate their logistics. "The Unsk Infinity is currently anchored in the subspace fold," the weapon explained, her hands manipulating holographic projections of Middle-earth's geography, mapping Eriada with satellite precision. "Captain Lasky has the crew on high alert. The slipspace drive is under repair, but we have full access to the armory and the motor pool. We've managed to store a full complement of Pelicans, Warthogs, and heavy munitions into the Valor's pocket dimension." She looked at Gandalf, then at Frodo. "Chief, You and Optimus can literally pull weapons and vehicles out of thin air whenever you need them, and because of the Valor's magic, the sheer tonnage of that equipment won't affect the delicate terrain or the gravitational pull of this world while stored. It's a perfect, invisible logistical tale. And what of the halflings? Optimus asked, his voice filled with a deep, fatherly concern that seemed entirely at odds with his towering, metallic form. Frodo Baggins carries a weight far heavier than his small frame suggests. He cannot make this journey alone. He won't, Chief decided. He looked at the map, his tactical mind charting waypoints, calculating elevation, and assessing threat vectors. Gandalf, you said you need to head south to Isengard to consult the head of your order. Do it. I'll take Frodo and anyone else who needs to come toward the settlement of Bree. Optimus will provide heavy, over-the-horizon support from the forest line. We avoid the main roads. We stay dark. Wait. Gandalf held up a hand, his brow furrowed. You must be careful, Master Chief. The enemy has eyes everywhere. Spies of Sauron take many forms. Crebain from Dunland, wolves in the dark, and the very wind itself can carry whispers to Barad-dûr. You must not reveal your true nature to the world unless it is a matter of life or death. A giant of iron and a soldier of the stars will draw the eye of Sauron faster than the ring itself. Master Chief did not argue. He understood the necessity of stealth. He reached out his armored hand into the empty air of the hallway. A golden ripple, like a disturbance in a still, sunlit pond, appeared at his side. He reached into the void, his arm disappearing up to the elbow, and pulled out a standard issue Unsk tactical rucksack. However, this one had been heavily modified in the last few hours by the Infinity's engineers. It was lined with high-density lead, a layer of titanium plating, and a localized, batter-powered Forerunner-derived energy shield. The weapon and I have prepared a dampening field for the ring, Chief said, stepping forward. He handed the surprisingly heavy pouch to Frodo, who took it with wide, marveling eyes. It won't stop the neural wisp entirely. You will still feel its weight, Frodo, but it will mask the energy signature from long-range biological and magical tracking. It acts as a Faraday cage for the soul. It'll make it much harder for the Nine to track us over open ground. Frodo carefully placed the envelope inside the pouch and sealed it. Immediately, he gasped. The oppressive, cloying sensation at the back of his mind, the feeling of being watched by a lidless, burning eye diminished to a dull, distant throb. It's quieter, Frodo breathed, looking up at the Spartan with profound gratitude. Thank you, Master Chief. Keep it close. Don't take it out, Chief ordered simply. The departure from Bag End was a study in vivid, almost surreal contrast. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of blooming night jasmine and the distant, fading laughter of the party-goers who had fallen asleep in the fields. Frodo stood at the garden gate. Beside him stood Samwise Gamgee, who had been caught eavesdropping and instantly conscripted into the journey by Gandalf. Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took, having stumbled upon the quiet departure while sneaking away from the beer tents, had fiercely refused to be left behind. The four hobbits stood together, their small packs laden with bread, cheese, salt, and extra woolen socks. They looked like children playing at adventure in the woods. Standing behind them, shrouded in the shifting, silvery mists of the Shire, were the two titans of another age. Optimus Prime shifted his form. In a flurry of mechanical, impossibly fluid movement, plates sliding over pistons and servos locking into place, he became the long-nosed truck once more. However, using the adaptive camouflage technology integrated by the weapon, his colors were muted. The vibrant crimson and cobalt faded into a dull, weathered gray and deep forest green, blending perfectly with the twilight. He moved without sound, his massive tires barely depressing the dirt of the road, his internal combustion engine replaced by a silent, electric plasma hum. Master Chief took the lead, stepping out of the gate. He walked with a rhythmic, predatory grace. His MA-40 assault rifle was slung across his back, but his hands rested near his sidearms. His golden visor swept the tree line continuously, his motion tracker pinging the surrounding 50 meters with rhythmic precision. "Mr. Frodo," Samwise whispered, his voice trembling as he hoisted his heavy pack and looked up at the broad, armored back of the Spartan walking ahead of them. "Is he an elf?" The gaffer said elves were tall and fair, but he's very tall, and he looks more like a walking anvil. "He's a Spartan, Sam," Frodo replied in a hushed tone, though he didn't truly understand the word. It sounded hard and unyielding. Frodo felt the pouch against his chest. The ring was heavy, but every time he looked at the chief's steady, unshakable stride, the whisper in his mind seemed to cower in fear. The ring understood the minds of men, elves, and dwarves. It knew how to twist their desires. But the mind of John 117 was an alien fortress built on duty, trauma, and a hyperlethal discipline that the ring could find no purchase on. They moved through the woody end as the moon reached its zenith. The Shire was a painting of deep, velvet greens and silver shadows. The hobbits chattered nervously at first, but the sheer, silent professionalism of their escorts soon demanded a quiet reverence. Suddenly, Optimus's voice came over the encrypted internal comms, echoing softly in the chief's helmet. "Master Chief, halt. The ambient temperature has dropped by 12 degrees. The air has turned stagnant." Chief raised a single, clenched fist. The hobbits, sensing the sudden shift in the giant's posture, froze instantly. Merry and Pippin huddled close to Sam. In the distance, a long, mournful cry tore through the night canopy. It wasn't the sound of a wolf, nor the screech of a night bird. It was the sound of a soul being shredded on a rack of ice, a sound that made the blood in the hobbit's veins turn to slush. "The 9, the weapon whispered in Chief's ear, her holographic avatar not appearing, prioritizing stealth. "They're on the road, 2 clicks out and closing fast on horseback. Chief, the dampening pouch is working. They can't pinpoint the ring, but they're tracking the spatial displacement we caused upon arrival. They're tracking the new light." "Optimus, status?" Chief asked, his hands moving with blinding speed to unsling his assault rifle, his thumb flicking the safety off with a soft click. "I am in position," Optimus replied. From the dark, impenetrable depths of the ancient forest bordering the road, the massive truck's headlights flickered once, a low, amber glow that illuminated the fog. "If they seek to extinguish the light of these small ones, they must first face the flame of the primes. Frodo Baggins, take your companions and move into the hollow beneath the roots of the great oak. Do not make a sound. Do not look back." The hobbits didn't need to be told twice. Driven by a primal, ancestral fear of the dark, they scrambled down the embankment, sliding into a deep hollow obscured by thick ferns and the massive, twisting roots of an ancient tree. The chapter of the Shire was truly, irrevocably over, as the sound of iron-shod hooves began to thud against the dirt road, growing louder and more frantic with every second. The Master Chief stood dead center in the middle of the path. He was alone, emerald sentinel against the coming storm. The mist swirled around his armored boots. High above, hidden in the silent, golden void of the Valar's pocket dimension, the Unsk Infinity waited. Its MAC cannons were cold, but its heart beat in perfect sync with the warriors on the ground. Through the fog, the first silhouette of a black rider appeared, its horse rearing up, its red eyes glowing with infernal malice. The wraith drew a blade of Morgul steel, sensing the presence of a living being in its path. It expected a terrified ranger, or perhaps a lost, trembling hobbit. Instead, it found the Master Chief. The Spartan raised his rifle, the weapon locking snugly into the groove of his shoulder armor. His targeting reticle glowed a steady, lethal red in his HUD. The hunt for the ring was on, but for the first time in the third age of Middle-earth, the shadows of Mordor were the ones who were about to learn the meaning of fear. Chapter 05. The geometry of shadows. The road leading through the marsh toward the Bucklebury Ferry was a narrow, muddy vein flanked by ancient, suffocating greenery. The air here was fundamentally different from the breezy, well-tended uplands of Hobbiton. It was heavy, stagnant, and thick with the scent of damp earth. decaying peat, and rotting leaves. But beneath the organic smells of the bog lay something else, a creeping, unnatural chill that seemed to actively swallow the light of the stars. Frodo Baggins, Samwise Gamgee, Meriadoc Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took moved in a tight, trembling cluster. To the four hobbits, the world had suddenly expanded from a cozy map of inns and gardens into a vast, terrifying wilderness. Every snapping twig sounded like a bone breaking, every shadow looked like a grasping hand. Yet, whenever they looked up, their terror was tempered by awe. Looming above them were the silhouettes of their impossible guardians. The Master Chief moved with the eerie, fluid silence of a hunting cat, his emerald armor absorbing the moonlight. Behind them rolled the massive, grey-painted truck, its engine emitting a silent, electric hum, acting as a moving mountain to block any sightlines from the rear. Master Chief was in full tactical mode. Inside his helmet, the HUD was a stream of constant, hyper-focused data. His Mjolnir Gen 3 armor's internal thermal regulators were working overtime to counteract a localized, anomalous drop in temperature that defied meteorological logic. His motion tracker was a clean sweep of blue, save for the 4 green dots representing the hobbits at his feet. But his instinct, a sixth sense honed by decades of relentless, interstellar war, was screaming that they were not alone. The weapon, Chief whispered, his voice a subvocal rumble transmitted directly into his neural interface. The interference on the tracker. Is it getting worse? The blue AI appeared on his internal reticle, her digital brow deeply furrowed. She wasn't just analyzing data, she looked genuinely disturbed. It's not just electromagnetic interference, Chief. It's topological. The space around us is being warped. Whoever or whatever these wraiths are, they aren't just moving through the environment. They're dragging a piece of another dimension with them. My sensors are hitting a wall of non-existence. They register as absolute zero, both thermally and spiritually. Get off the road, quick. The warning didn't come from the tactical AI, nor did it come from a ranger of the north. It came from Optimus Prime. His advanced Cybertronian sensors, elevated and attuned by the ancient, divine light of the matrix of leadership, had detected a jagged, screeching ripple in the song of ardor discordance that no purely mathematical machine could calculate. In an instant, the tense but peaceful night was shattered. A high-pitched, metallic rasp echoed through the twisted willows. It was the sound of a breath drawn through a throat of rusted iron, carrying the stench of open graves and thousand-year-old despair. Chief didn't hesitate. He grabbed Frodo and Sam by the heavy wool of their traveling cloaks, hoisting them effortlessly with one arm, and leaped into a deep, muddy hollow beneath the gnarled, overhanging roots of a massive oak tree. Merry and Pippin, spurred by pure survival instinct, scrambled in right after them, tumbling into the wet mulch and dead leaves. "Stay down. Don't breathe," Chief commanded. His voice was a low-frequency vibration that the hobbits felt in their ribcage rather than heard with their ears. From the dirt road above, the sound of hoofbeats approached. Clop, clop, clop. They were slow, rhythmic, and possibly heavy. A black rider appeared at the edge of the embankment. To the chief's augmented eyes, it was a void in the shape of a man, draped in tattered, obsidian robes that seemed to drink the ambient moonlight. It sat atop a horse that was more nightmare than animal, its coat matted with a natural sweat, its eyes glowing with a sickly, red fire that burned without heat. The creature projected an aura of profound, paralyzing dread. The black breath. The hobbits huddled together, trembling violently. In Frodo's lead-lined pouch, the ring began to pulse. It was a rhythmic, heavy throb against his chest. The whisper returned to his mind, slipping past the Spartan's dampening field. It was a seductive, oily voice, speaking in a black tongue, promising absolute power, promising safety, if only he would slip the golden band onto his finger. Just once, the voice hissed. "Hide from the dark in the dark." Master Chief watched through the lattice of roots, his armored fingers hovering over the hilt of his combat knife. He knew his MA-40 assault rifle would be too loud, The muzzle flash and supersonic crack of 7.62 mm rounds would act as a beacon, alerting every shadow in the Shire. Instead, he engaged his active camouflage. A cascading wave of light-bending polygons washed over the Spartan and the four hobbits huddled against his chest. The technology bent the visual spectrum around them, turning the group into a perfect, shimmering blur of grey bark and brown dirt. But what of the giant? Active camo could hide a Spartan, but it could not hide a multi-ton transport truck. As the Nazgul turned its faceless, hooded head toward the trees, searching for the new light it had sensed earlier, Optimus Prime utilized the grace of the Valor. In a display of breathtaking, silent majesty, the massive truck didn't just drive away, it phased. A golden ripple, like the surface of a sunlit pond disturbed by a gentle breeze, washed over the vehicle's chassis. Optimus retreated entirely into the infinite spatial dimension storage. To the Nazgul's spectral sight, it looked as if the massive metallic presence simply dissolved into motes of golden dust, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of ozone and the whispering wind. The wraith hissed, a sound of profound, venomous frustration. It dismounted, its heavy, iron-shod boots crunching on the gravel. It moved deliberately toward the hollow where the hobbits hid, drawn by the faint, inescapable gravity of the One Ring. It leaned down, its faceless hood sniffing the air, probing the darkness. Frodo's hand twitched. He reached toward the pouch. His eyes glazed over, the blue irises dilating until they were almost entirely black. The ring was calling to its servant. The weapon saw it instantly. "Chief, Frodo's heart rate is spiking to 180 BPM. Neural interference is at 90%. He's going under. The artifact is establishing a direct cognitive link." John 117 moved with surgical precision. He reached out and placed a heavy, armored hand directly over Frodo's trembling fingers, pinning them gently but immovably against the hobbit's chest. The cold, unyielding ceramic and titanium of the Mjolnir glove acted as a physical grounding wire. But it was more than just metal. The Spartan's own indomitable will, the sheer, stubborn luck and hyperlethal discipline that had seen him survive the fall of Reach, the horrors of the Flood, and the destruction of the Halo rings poured into the small hobbit. It was a mind built for war, fundamentally incompatible with the ring's promises of domination. Not today. The chief's silent presence seemed to broadcast. "You hold the line." Frodo blinked hard. He gasped, sucking in the damp air, the hypnotic trance breaking as if a glass window had been shattered in his mind. The wraith on the bank above stiffened. It sensed the sudden, violent surge of Spartan resolve, a wall of psychological titanium that it could not pierce. Recoiling as if physically struck by the defiance, the Nazgul let out a frustrated, ear-splitting screech. It spun around, its black cloak billowing, remounted its terrifying steed, and galloped furiously away into the darkness of the woods to search elsewhere. The sanctuary of the Spark the Path is momentarily clear. Optimus's deep voice resonated through the encrypted comms as he phased back into reality. The golden ripple returned, and the massive truck solidified, its tires hitting the dirt road with a soft, reassuring thud. The chief deactivated the active camo. The hobbits crawled out of the muddy hollow, shaking uncontrollably, their faces pale and streaked with dirt. What in the Shire were those things?" Sam whispered, clutching his cast-iron frying pan to his chest as if it were a shield of Gondorian steel. "Enemies of life," Optimus replied. His vehicle form shifted, panels sliding and gears locking in a symphony of mechanical perfection until he stood in his towering humanoid stance. The moonlight caught the silver and muted blues of his plating, making him look like a mechanized knight of ancient legend. "But they are not invincible, Samwise. They fear the light you carry, Frodo Baggins. Not merely the dark light of the ring, but the pure light of your spirit." "We need to move," Chief interjected, his visor scanning the horizon, processing the telemetry. "We've got 4 miles to the Bucklebury ferry. If they realize they lost the scent, they'll double back." "Weapon, can we get a reconnaissance drone up for overhead visual?" "Negative, Chief," the AI replied, shaking her head. "The atmosphere is too thick with whatever shadow they're casting." The EDEM interference would fry the drone's telemetry, and the visual profile would act as a flare. But I can pull an M12 Warthog from the subspace storage. It's fast enough to outrun those horses, easily. No, Optimus cautioned, kneeling down so his massive face was closer to the group. The roar of a combustion engine would bring the 9 down upon us all at once. We must move as the people of this world move. We require stealth and speed, but without the footprint of heavy machinery. He looked at the 4 hobbits. They were exhausted, terrified, and freezing. Their small legs were already trembling from the adrenaline crash, and they would never survive a 4-mile dead sprint through a swamp. Master Chief, Optimus said slowly. A compromise. Optimus reached up with his massive hands and placed them on his own chest plates. With a heavy, hydraulic hiss, the armored plating parted and folded outward. Within the Prime's broad chest, a breathtaking sight was revealed. Enshrined in a casing of ancient, unbreakable Cybertronian metal, the matrix of leadership glowed with a soft, pulsing azure and golden light. It was the antithesis of the ring, a profound, warm aura of wisdom, creation, and boundless compassion. Adjacent to the matrix housing was a small, heavily shielded compartment originally designed for the secure transport of high-value Cybertronian memory cores and protoforms. I can carry them, Optimus offered, his optics dimming to a gentle blue. My internal dampeners will shield them from the cold of the wraiths and the bumps of the road. You and your Spartans can provide the tactical screen on foot. The hobbits looked at the giant's chest with a mix of absolute awe and lingering terror. To step inside a living machine was beyond the wildest tales of Bilbo Baggins. It's okay, Frodo said softly. He stepped forward, sensing the deep, abiding kindness radiating from the Prime's spark. The oppressive weight of the ring felt miraculously lighter in the presence of the Matrix. He's a friend, Sam. We trust him. One by one, the Master Chief lifted the hobbits. Despite his lethal strength, he handled them with the care of a father holding fragile glass, placing them securely into the padded, high-tech interior of Optimus Prime. It was like stepping into a small, futuristic room filled with the soothing hum of advanced electronics and the overwhelming warmth of a benevolent god. The chest plates slid shut, sealing them in a cocoon of safety. Passengers secured, vitals stabilizing. The weapon chirped happily. Move out, Chief commanded. The sprint to the river, the final trek to the Bucklebury ferry became a masterclass in tactical evasion. Optimus Prime shifted back into his stalker mode, the sleek, metallic panther form that distributed his massive weight across multi-jointed stabilizers. He moved through the dense brush with astonishing grace, the hobbits safe and warm within his armored core. Master Chief moved at a dead sprint on his flank, his Mjolnir armor pushing his augmented muscles to their absolute limits. He was a green shadow blurring through the undergrowth, clearing obstacles in massive, bounding leaps, his sensors linked directly to the Unsk Infinity anchored high above in the spatial fold. In that golden pocket of non-space, the bridge of the Infinity was a hive of controlled chaos. Captain Lasky, a sensor operations officer, reported, her hands flying across holographic displays. Blue team is in position at the ferry coordinates. Spartans Fred, Kelly, and Linda have secured the raft and cleared the immediate perimeter of hostiles. Good work, Captain Thomas Lasky said, staring intently at the massive holographic globe of Middle-earth rotating in the center of the bridge. Keep the localized interference generators running at maximum output along their back trail. I want those Nazgul blind, deaf, and disoriented until our boys are across the water. Down on the surface, the group finally reached the muddy banks of the Brandywine River. The air was drastically colder here, and a thick, white fog had rolled in off the water shroud that smelled of damp reeds and deep currents. Chief, behind us, the weapon shouted, a spike of alarm in her voice. Telemetry confirms the localized jamming is failing against their sheer willpower. The 9 had regrouped. Through the swirling fog, 5 of the Black Riders were now visible, galloping down the embankment like harbingers of the apocalypse. They had abandoned stealth, They were closing the gap with terrifying speed, their jagged Morgul blades drawn. They shrieked in a dissonant chorus of hatred that threatened to shatter the hobbit's sanity, even through the thick armor of Optimus's chest. "Prime, to the ferry!" Chief yelled, sliding to a halt on the wooden planks of the pier, his assault rifle raised to cover the rear. Optimus Prime didn't transform into a beast or a truck this time. He exploded upward into his towering humanoid form, his massive legs eating up the remaining ground in 3 thunderous strides. He reached the wooden pier, the ancient pilings groaning and splintering under his immense weight. "Get on the boat," Optimus commanded, his chest plates opening. He gently, swiftly extracted the hobbits, placing them onto the flat, wooden ferry raft. The Master Chief leaped onto the deck beside them, his half-done weight causing the raft to dip dangerously low into the dark, churning water. Kelly 087, already on the raft, grabbed the mooring ropes. "What about you, Optimus?" Frodo cried out in panic as Sam and Fred 104 began to haul fiercely on the ferry's iron chain, pulling them away from the bank. "The water is deep, and my armor is heavy," Optimus replied, his voice calm despite the approaching nightmare. "I will buy you the time you need." As the ferry pulled out into the mist, the Nazgul reached the edge of the pier. They screeched in unholy fury, their nightmarish horses rearing back, their hooves striking sparks against the wood. But they stopped, driven by an ancient, elemental curse. The race could not easily cross running water. Standing on the muddy bank, blocking their view of the retreating raft, a lone, towering figure faced the Lords of Mordor. Optimus Prime reached into his subspace manifold and drew his Energon battle axe. The weapon deployed with a searing, electronic crackle. The massive, double-bladed head glowed with a blinding, incandescent orange heat that cut through the unnatural fog like a lighthouse beam, casting long, dramatic shadows across the river. "I am the shield of the innocent," Optimus roared, his voice amplified to a booming crescendo that shook the very leaves from the trees and sent ripples across the Brandywine. "You shall find no prey here." The Nazgul recoiled violently. They were creatures of cold and shadow, and they shrank from the blistering heat of the Energon axe and the sheer, blinding purity of the Prime's will. Their horses bucked and thrashed, refusing to step closer to the giant of iron and fire. They hissed, turning their mounts, seeking a way around the river, but the message had been delivered with the force of a thunderbolt. The new light was not alone, and it would not yield. As the ferry reached the safety of the far bank, bumping gently against the Bucklerland pier, the Master Chief looked back through the dense, swirling fog. He saw the brilliant orange glow of the axe slowly fade as Optimus, his duty fulfilled, stepped backward into the shimmering golden portal of the spatial storage, disappearing from the bank to safely rejoin them on the other side. "We're across," Chief said, lowering his rifle. His hand rested reassuringly on Frodo's small, trembling shoulder. "You did well, Frodo. All of you. Are we safe now, Mr. Chief?" Pippin asked, his voice barely a squeak. Chief looked out into the mist, calculating the distance to their next waypoint, the weight of the ring, and the relentless nature of the enemy they had just provoked. "We bought ourselves a head start," the Spartan replied, turning his gaze toward the dark, rolling hills of the east. "But the road to Bree is long, and the enemy is just getting started." The chapter of the Marish ended with the rhythmic, gentle lapping of the river against the shore and the silent, emerald watch of a Spartan, as the Fellowship of Iron and Magic prepared to move deeper into the unknown. High above, the ancient stars of Middle-earth shone brightly, their timeless light finally meeting the cold, hard brilliance of the 26th century. Chapter 06. The shadow under the gate. The rain began as a fine, miserable mist over the Chetwood, a creeping dampness that clung to cloaks and chilled the bone. But by the time the clustered, dark spires of Bree Hill emerged from the gloom of the old forest, it had transformed into a relentless, cold deluge. The atmosphere of the Bree land was vastly different from the pastoral, sheltered warmth of the Shire. Here, the air tasted of wet stone, acrid peat smoke, and a pervasive, low-hanging suspicion. The wild was closer here, untamed and hungry, pressing hard against the ancient hedges and crumbling stone walls of the human settlement. At the edge of the greenway, where the muddy road narrowed toward the west gate of Bree, the Fellowship of Iron and Halfling paused. Master Chief stood as an unmoving monolith in the center of the rutted track. The rain hissed as it struck his Mjolnir Gen 3 armor. The internal temperature regulators, fighting to maintain optimal combat conditions against the unnatural chill, vented steam that curled around his emerald pauldrons like ghostly fingers. Through his polarized visor, the world was a high-contrast thermal and tactical map. He saw the heat signatures of the four hobbits' small, shivering lanterns of life huddled under their sodden cloaks. Beyond them, he tracked the faint, encrypted perimeter markers left by Blue Team. Spartans Fred, Kelly, and Linda were currently ghosting through the outskirts of the town, establishing a sniper overwatch and securing exfiltration routes. The weapon, Chief said, his voice a low, gravelly vibration over the internal comms. Scanning Bree. Give me a localized threat assessment. The blue AI appeared in a micro-projection within the corner of his HUD. She was rapidly passing data, her digital eye scanning the town's architecture. Population is a roughly equal mix of men and hobbits, Chief. High density of metal, mostly crude iron tools, farming implements, and simple blades. But Chief, there's a noise in the data. The town is old, built on layers of history I can't quantify. It's a nexus point for travelers, which means it's a blind spot for our predictive algorithms. She paused, zooming in on the gate ahead. And there's someone at the gate. One individual. Low heart rate. Elevated cortisol levels. He's been waiting. He's afraid, but not of us. A massive ripple in the air occurred beside the chief, distorting the falling rain. Optimus Prime stepped partially out of the infinite spatial dimension storage. He shimmered into existence, a mirage turning into solid steel. He remained in his humanoid form, though he lowered his height, retracting his primary hydraulics to kneel in the thick mud, bringing his glowing sapphire optics level with the chief's visor. I will remain within the void, Optimus rumbled. His voice was modulated to stay within the frequency of the falling rain, blending with the storm. A being of my stature would bring only terror to the people of this town. We must not be the monsters they fear in the dark. But I am with you, John. My sensory arrays are linked to yours. If the shadows reach this gate, I will step through. Understood, Prime, Chief replied. He turned to the hobbits. Frodo was deathly pale, his hand clutched tightly over the lead-lined pouch beneath his tunic that held the ring. Stay close, Chief commanded, his tone brook no argument. No names, no talk of the Shire. You're just travelers. Let me do the talking. The keeper of the gate, the west gate of Bree, was a heavy, iron-shod barrier of ancient oak, scarred by weather and time. As the group approached, a small, barred window slid open with a screech. It revealed the squinting, rain-slicked face of Harry Goatleaf, the gatekeeper. He held a flickering, oil-stained lantern that threw long, distorted shadows across the mud. What do you want? Who are you? The gatekeeper growled, his voice thick with the wariness of a man who lived on the edge of the wild, where outlaws and worse roamed freely. Master Chief stepped forward into the circle of lantern light. To Harry Goatleaf, the Spartan was the most terrifying thing he had ever laid eyes on. He didn't look like an orc, nor a man in any armor the gatekeeper recognized. He looked like a statue of green jade, fashioned by a blacksmith of the gods, with a face of solid, reflective gold that stared back at the lantern's flame with an unblinking, mechanical intensity. We seek lodging, Chief said. He didn't move aggressively, yet the sheer physical density and presence of the Spartan made the gatekeeper draw back a foot. Open the gate, Harry stuttered, his eyes darting from the armored giant to the four hobbits huddled behind his massive legs. Hobbits, from the Shire, by the looks of M. And you, what in Durin's name are you? Some kind of knight from the south? A sellsword of Gondor? A traveler, Chief replied, his voice flat. The gatekeeper, sensing that any further questioning might be met with a force he couldn't possibly comprehend, swallowed hard and pulled the heavier iron lever. The gate groaned open on rusted hinges, admitting them into the winding, muddy streets of Bree. As they walked toward the Prancing Pony, the town's premier inn, the weapon's voice chirped sharply in Chief's ear. "Chief, I'm detecting a localized distortion. 2 o'clock high. Someone is watching us from a second-story window of the inn. Heart rate is steady at 50 beats per minute. Breathing is perfectly controlled. This isn't a civilian. This is a predator. Target identified," Chief muttered, acknowledging the waypoint his HUD placed on the window. He didn't turn his head, but his internal sensors locked onto the individual, tracking their every micro-movement. The Prancing Pony was a cacophony of overwhelming sensory input. It smelled strongly of stale ale, roasting pork, wet wool, and unwashed bodies. The common room was packed with Bree folk, traveling merchants, and dwarves from the Blue Mountains. Their voices were a dull roar that masked the group's entrance. Barlaam Butterbur, the innkeeper, hurried toward them, his face a permanent mask of harried hospitality, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Welcome, welcome. A bit of a wet night for a stroll, eh? What can I do for you, oh my?" He stopped dead, his jaw dropping as he stared up at the Master Chief. "Great Elena," Butterbur gasped, stepping back. "You're a big one, aren't you? Where'd you get that suit? Is that painted iron? Must weigh a ton. We need a room." Frodo stepped forward quickly, trying to divert the innkeeper's attention before he started asking too many questions. "Under the name of Mr. Underhill, and a quiet corner for dinner. Of course, Mr. Underhill," Butterbur chirped, visibly relieved to deal with a hobbit, though his eyes kept drifting nervously back to the green giant standing stoically by the door. "Right this way. I have a parlor just the size for your folk." As the hobbits moved to a table, the chief scanned the room. His HUD worked overtime, tagging every individual with threat assessments. Civilian, potential combatant, dwarf with axe, civilian. His gaze settled on a dark, shadowy corner near the hearth. A lone man sat there, his long legs stretched out, his face completely hidden beneath a travel-worn, mud-spattered hood. A long, slender pipe sent up wisps of smoke, obscuring his features further. "The weapon, that's him," Chief said via subvocal comms. "Analysis complete," the weapon replied. "He's a ranger. The gear is functional, well-maintained but heavily weathered. No excess weight. His heart rate elevated slightly when he saw you, but it's returning to baseline. He's analyzing your armor, Chief. He's dangerous." The hobbits sat at a table, their tension finally breaking as Butterbur brought out platters of hot food and mugs of ale. But Pippin, emboldened by the alcohol and the deceptive warmth of the inn, began to talk loudly. He spoke of the Shire, of Bilbo's grand party, and of the disappearing act. "Chief," the weapon warned urgently, "the Underhill kid is losing control of the narrative. The ring's energy signature is spiking in response to the localized stress. It's feeding off the noise in the room. It wants to be noticed." Frodo stood up quickly, sensing the danger, intending to pull Pippin away. But in his haste, his foot caught on a loose, uneven floorboard. He pitched forward, and the lead-lined pouch slipped open. The ring flew from his hand. In a moment of cinematic, anime-inspired slow motion, the gold band spun through the air, glinting malevolently in the firelight. To the men of Bree, it was just a dropped trinket. To the Master Chief, it was a high-yield neural beacon acting as a flare for the enemy. Chief moved. To the observers in the room, the Spartan was merely a blur of emerald light. He didn't try to catch the ring. He knew better than to touch the artifact with his bare hands. Instead, he lunged, using the reinforced composite stock of his M40 assault rifle to swat the ring midair, batting it with surgical precision directly back toward Frodo's outstretched hand. But the ring had a will of its own. It seemed to slip through the air, guided by an invisible, malicious current. Instead of falling into Frodo's palm, it slid perfectly, impossibly, onto his index finger. Flash! The void and the world turned to a grey, howling void. To Frodo, the warmth and noise of the prancing pony disappeared instantly, replaced by the terrifying, all-encompassing sight of the eye. The shadows lengthened into claws, and the wind screamed with the voices of the damned. But he wasn't alone in the Shadow Realm. A massive, golden presence stood over him in the void. It was Optimus Prime, or rather, the pure, indomitable spirit of the Prime, projected across dimensions through the power of the Matrix of Leadership. "Do not succumb, Frodo." Optimus's voice echoed in the void, a thunderous command of light that pushed back the grey mist. "The shadow has no power over the spark of the innocent. Cast it off." Empowered by the Prime's light, Frodo ripped the ring off his finger, falling violently back into the reality of the tavern. He crashed onto the wooden floor. The room was dead silent. Every eye was fixed on the empty space where the Hobbit had just been, and where he had suddenly reappeared. Before Frodo could scramble to his feet, a strong, calloused hand grabbed him roughly by the collar and hauled him toward the stairs. It was the Ranger from the corner. "You have a stout heart, Master Hobbit," the Ranger growled, his eyes flashing like struck flint. "But you are a fool, and your mechanical friend has just signaled every wraith within 20 miles. The Master Chief stepped squarely into the Ranger's path, blocking the stairwell. His rifle was raised, the barrel aimed squarely at the man's chest. The two warriors, one a genetically augmented super soldier of the 26th century, the other a man of the ancient, noble line of kings, locked eyes. The tension in the room was a physical weight. "Let him go," Chief said. His thumb flicked the safety off. The soft click sounded like a cannon shot in the silent tavern. "Lower your weapon, Spartan," the Ranger replied calmly, using a word he shouldn't possibly know. He didn't look at the rifle, he looked at the empty air beside the chief. "And tell the giant in the void that I am a friend of Gandalf the Grey." The air warped. Optimus Prime stepped fully out of the spatial dimension, manifesting inside the inn. He remained in his stalker mode, the massive, metallic panther, but even crouched, his head brushed the ceiling beams, the ancient wood groaning under his proximity. The patrons of the prancing pony screamed in sheer terror, overturning tables as they scrambled for the exits. But the Ranger didn't flinch. He stood his ground before the titans of iron. "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn," the man said, lowering his hood completely to reveal a face of rugged, weather-beaten authority and piercing grey eyes. "I am called Strider in these parts, and if you wish to see the dawn, you will listen to me. The 9 are at the gates." Optimus Prime bowed his massive, silver head, a mechanical hum of deep respect vibrating through the floorboards. "The heir of Isildur, the Matrix spoke of a king who would return. Master Chief, stand down. This man's heart is true. He carries the weight of a broken sword, but not a broken spirit." Chief lowered his rifle, but his HUD remained locked on Aragorn, sensors at high alert. "The Nazgul are 5 minutes out. Aragorn, what's the play?" "To the rooms," Aragorn said, his voice urgent, taking command. "We must make them believe the hobbits are sleeping in their beds. We will set a decoy, and then, we pray your star metal armor can withstand the blades of the dead." As the rain hammered fiercely against the thatched roof of the prancing pony, the Fellowship of Iron and the Ranger of the North prepared for the first true test of their sudden alliance. The chapter of Bree was closing in blood and shadow, and the dark, perilous road to Weathertop lay ahead, a path where the technology of the future and the heritage of the past would have to unite against the overwhelming darkness of the East. Chapter 07. The echoes of Amon Sul. The atmosphere atop the steep, crowning hill of Weathertop, the ancient, ruined watcher of Amon Sul, was a suffocating blend of stagnant history and creeping, unnatural dread. The wind here did not simply blow, it hissed through the crumbling, black stones like a dying breath drawn through cracked teeth. Below them, the Great East Road was nothing more than a bruised, grey ribbon lost in the gathering twilight of the Midgewater marshes, swallowed by a heavy fog that seemed to crawl upward toward the summit. Aragorn, his face a mask of weathered stone and quiet anxiety, crouched near the center of the ring of broken pillars. Beside him, the 4 hobbits huddled tightly around a small, ill-advised fire tucked into a depression in the stone. The crackle of burning scrubwood was the only sound pushing back against the oppressive, heavy silence of the wild. But to those trained to listen, the silence was a lie. Master Chief stood at the absolute edge of the ruin's jagged perimeter, a silent sentinel gazing into the dark. His olive-drab Mjolnir Gen 3 armor was matted with the soot and mud of the wasteland, dulling its usual military sheen. He stood as a statue of emerald and gold, his polarized visor reflecting the dying, bruised orange light of the western horizon. To his left, a massive ripple in the air distorting the landscape like intense heat rising over a desert highway signaled the presence of the Unsk Infinity's tactical overlay maintained within the Valor's subspace pocket. The weapon, status report, Chief commanded, his voice a low, disciplined rasp that did not carry beyond his helmet's internal comms. The blue, holographic form of the AI flickered into his retinal display. Her usually bright expression was uncharacteristically tight, her digital brow furrowed as she passed data that defied logic. "Chief, the atmospheric density is shifting rapidly," she said, her voice laced with technical frustration. "I'm detecting a localized temporal and spatial dip. It's like the Wraith world is bleeding into the physical plane, overwriting our reality. Thermal imaging is entirely useless. Whatever is out there has no heat signature. In fact, they register as absolute zero. It's an active entropy field. But my acoustic sensors and topological scanners are picking up 5 distinct voids in the ambient wind. They're coming up the northern slope. Fast." Chief's armored hand moved smoothly to the hilt of his heavy combat knife, then to the grip of his MA-40 assault rifle. "Optimus, do you have eyes?" "I am mere eyes in the dark, John." A deep, resonant voice echoed through the encrypted, Spartan-only frequency. From the deep shadows of the lower cliffs, the gargantuan form shimmered into existence. Optimus Prime did not simply walk up the hill. He materialized directly from the infinite spatial dimension storage granted by the grace of the Valor. In a breathtaking, anime-inspired display of mechanical fluidity, plates of cobalt and crimson armor slid and locked into place. He caught the first starlight on his chrome finish, glowing with a faint, holy luminescence. He remained in a crouched, predatory stance, using the curvature of the hill to hide his 30-foot silhouette. His massive internal gears ground with a musical, rhythmic precision that echoed the ancient masonry around them. "The shadow of the 9 grows long," Optimus rumbled, his optics burning with a fierce, sapphire light that pierced the unnatural fog. Their sparks were extinguished millennia ago, replaced by a cold, consuming hunger. "Master Chief, protect the small ones. I shall be the bulwark against the tide." Suddenly, the fire in the center of the ruins sputtered and died. It wasn't blown out by the wind, it was extinguished as if an invisible, freezing hand had choked the very life from the flames. The temperature plummeted 40 degrees in a heartbeat. Frost instantly crystallized on the chief's armor and the hobbits' cloaks. From the pitch-black darkness of the ruined stairs, 5 tall, shrouded figures rose. They did not move like men, they glided, their tattered, obsidian robes trailing behind them like thick, oily smoke. The Nazgul had arrived. The hobbits shrieked in absolute, primal terror, drawing the small, ancient barrow blades Tom Bombadil had given them. Frodo, his face deathly pale and his eyes wide and glazed, felt the ring around his neck turn as heavier as an anvil. The whisper that had haunted him since the Shire was no longer a murmur. It was a rhythmic, screaming command echoing in the marrow of his bones. "Put it on. Hide in the dark. Yield. Get back." Aragorn roared. He drew his longsword with one hand and swept up a burning brand from the dying fire with the other, standing firmly between the hobbits and the approaching nightmares. The Witch King of Anma, the tallest of the 5, stepped forward, the air around him warped with malice. He drew a long, shimmering blade of Morgul steel that hissed with a sickly, green miasma. Master Chief moved with the speed of a thunderbolt. He didn't fire his MA-40 rifle. The weapon had warned him that standard kinetic tungsten rounds would likely pass harmlessly through the spatial void the Wraiths inhabited. Instead, he engaged his Mjolnir thruster pack. In a violent blur of motion that left an emerald afterimage hanging in the freezing air, the Spartan closed the 50-foot gap in a fraction of a second and slammed shoulder first into the second Wraith. The impact was like a collision of 2 entirely different realities. The Chief's energy shields flared a brilliant, blinding electric blue as they made violent contact with the Wraith's necrotic aura. The Spartan's gauntlet, reinforced by the suit's hydraulic strength, struck the creature's faceless hood with enough force to shatter a concrete bunker. There was a sickening sound of rending metal and a spectral, agonizing shriek that completely bypassed the auditory nerves, tearing directly at the soul. Chief, their physical anchors are fluctuating upon contact with your plasma shielding, the weapon shouted over the blaring shield depletion alarms. Use the high-frequency combat knife. It's the only physical weapon vibrating fast enough to catch their localized phase shift. Chief didn't hesitate. He drew his blade from his shoulder pauldron. The monomolecular edge hummed violently, powered by a 26th century microcell glowing with a faint, deadly heat. He spun on his heel, ducking under a decapitating swing from a third Nazgul, and drove the vibrating knife upward. The clash of ancient Morgul steel against Spartan titanium and high-frequency energy sent a shower of brilliant white sparks into the night, sparks that burned with a cold, blue fire, illuminating the horrific, invisible faces beneath the hoods. But while the Chief was a god of war among men, the Nazgul were lords of terror. Their sheer proximity was draining his shields at an alarming rate, the necrotic energy eating away at the Mjolnir power output. In the center of the ruins, Frodo fell heavily to his knees. The ring was too heavy to bear. The physical world was fading, turning grey and thin, while the Shadow Realm snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. Through the veil, Frodo saw the wraiths as they truly were, not cloaked figures, but skeletal, ghastly kings with burning, hypnotic eyes, wearing crowns of pale, white fire. The Witch King turned his burning gaze away from the ranger and locked onto the ring-bearer. He lunged, his poisoned blade aimed directly at Frodo's heart. Not while I stand. The ground shook violently, as if a localized earthquake had struck the foundations of Aman-Sul. Optimus Prime leaped from the lower tier of the ruin, his massive frame perfectly silhouetted against the rising, pale moon. Mid-air, he underwent a breathtaking, thunderous transformation. Plates of heavier armor shifted and locked with deafening metallic cracks, his wheels tucked seamlessly into his calves. From his right forearm assembly, a massive, glowing orange Energon axe ignited with the roar of a jet turbine. Optimus landed squarely between Frodo and the Witch King. The sheer kinetic impact shattered the ancient flagstones beneath his massive feet, sending a shockwave of dust and debris outward. He stood 30 feet tall, a towering titan of starlight and unbreakable metal. "You serve a master of chains and despair," Optimus proclaimed, his voice a tectonic roar that physically pushed back the encroaching darkness, shaking the mist from the hill. "But freedom is the right of all sentient beings, even the smallest among us. Return to the void." The Witch King hissed, a sound of profound hatred that cracked the freezing air. Undeterred by the giant's size, the Lord of the Nazgul swung his Morgul blade at the Prime's knee joint. Optimus parried with his Energon axe. The meeting of the two weapons created a concussive shockwave that blew the hobbits backward off their feet and extinguished Aragorn's torch. The blistering orange heat of the Cybertronian axe clashed against the absolute zero of the wraith's shadow form. The plasma burned away the edges of the obsidian robes, searing the ethereal flesh beneath. The Witch King recoiled, a screech of genuine pain escaping his unseen lips. He sensed a power in this metal giant that he could not understand, could not corrupt the power of the spark, a primordial fire that was not of the sun, nor the moon, nor the secret fire of Arda, but of a distant, mechanical creator. But in that brief moment of distraction, the third and fourth Nazgul circled around the Prime's massive legs, striking at the Master Chief. The Spartan was engaged in a brutal, close-quarters dance of death. His Mjolnir armor took heavy, glancing hits as the wraith's blades relentlessly drained his shield strength. "Chief," shields dropping below 20%. The weapon warned, her avatar flashing red. "Their blades are bypassing the kinetic barriers. They're acting like energy siphons, draining the suit's microfusion reactor." Chief gritted his teeth, his vision momentarily flickering red as the suit compensated for the power drain. He activated his wrist-mounted grapple shot, firing the high-tensile cord into a crumbling stone archway above. He swung himself in a wide, violent arc, pulling his mass out of the blade's reach, and delivered a devastating 2-ton dropkick square into a wraith's chest. The sheer kinetic force of the Spartan's augmented weight sent the creature flying backward over the jagged edge of the ruin, tumbling down the dark slope. But the battlefield was too chaotic. For a split second, Frodo was left completely alone. The Witch King, seeing his opening and ignoring the towering Prime, lunged again with terrifying speed. Frodo, consumed by absolute, mind-shattering terror, yielded to the whisper. He slipped the ring onto his finger. The physical world vanished in a flash of blinding white. To Frodo, the Chief and Optimus became distant, muffled blurs of light and shadow, their roaring weapons sounding like they were underwater. But the Witch King loomed over him, a mountain of grey malice, his crown of white fire burning with triumphant cruelty. The Morgul blade descended in slow motion. Frodo! Aragorn screamed, leaping forward blindly into the dark, his sword swinging. The cursed blade bit deeply into Frodo's left shoulder. The hobbit let out an agonizing, soul-tearing cry, though the sound was immediately silenced by the vacuum of the void. Above them, Optimus Prime felt a sudden, sickening shift in the matrix of leadership within his chest chamber. The ancient relic pulsed with alarm. He felt the pure, innocent light of a small spark begin to suddenly dim, poisoned by a malice older than the stars. A surge of righteous, overwhelming fury unlike anything the Autobot leader had felt since the tragic fall of Iachan flooded his advanced neural net. He didn't just attack the wraiths, he became a localized storm of retribution. In a burst of speed that defied his massive bulk, Optimus's optics flared a blinding, continuous white. He reached his left hand deep into his infinite spatial dimension storage. From the Valor's armory, he withdrew the main cannon assembly of a Unsk M808 Scorpion tank, heavily modified by Infinity's engineers to be wielded as a handheld heavy weapon. But Optimus didn't fire a standard 90mm explosive shell. The physical ordnance would do nothing to the wraiths. Instead, he interfaced his own Cybertronian physiology directly with the cannon's firing mechanism, channeling the raw, divine energy of his own spark through the barrel. Begone into the shadow. A beam of pure, ionized azure energy erupted from the Scorpion cannon. It wasn't an explosion, it was a sustained wave of absolute, uncompromising light. The beam illuminated the entire hill of Weathertop, casting stark, daylight-bright shadows across the Midgewater marshes below. The beam struck the Witch King and the remaining Nazgul. The wraiths screamed a sound of such profound, existential agony that it shattered the remaining stone lintels of the Watchtower. Unable to maintain their physical anchors in the face of the Prime's blinding brilliance, their forms rapidly dissolved into shrieking wisps of black smoke, scattering into the howling wind. The remaining wraiths, seeing their invincible leader broken and scattered, and watching the Spartan warrior closing in with a vibrating blade and glowing shields, broke. They retreated into the darkness, their terrible shrieks fading into the distant night. The silence that rushed back into the ruins was heavy, ringing, and incredibly cold. Aragorn knelt instantly by Frodo. The hobbit lay pale, sweating, and terrifyingly still. The ring had slipped from his finger as he collapsed, returning him violently to the physical world. Sam, Merry, and Pippin rushed to his side, weeping in terror. Master Chief landed heavily beside them, his armor scorched black by necrotic energy, his shield slowly recharging with a high-pitched, strained whine. He looked down at the small, gasping hobbit. The weapon. Emergency medical scan, Chief commanded, dropping to one knee. A blue beam of scanning light washed over Frodo's trembling form. "It's bad, Chief," the weapon replied, her voice soft and thick with worry. A fragment of the blade broke off. It's lodged deep in the subclavicular tissue, and it's moving autonomously toward his heart. But it's not just physical damage, it's a necrotic cellular infection. It's rapidly rewriting his DNA into something dead. My biofoam can seal the puncture, but it cannot stop the infection. This is entirely magical. Our tech is useless against it. Optimus Prime knelt, the massive servos in his legs hissing loudly. His enormous shadow covered the group like a protective canopy. He looked down at the tiny, broken form of the ring-bearer. The giant reached out with a single, massive finger, resting it gently on the frozen earth beside the hobbit's head. "He carries a burden that would have broken the strongest warriors of my kind," Optimus said, his deep voice heavy with a profound, aching sorrow. "We cannot let his spark fade. Master Chief, Aragorn, we must get him to the elves. Only the ancient healers of Rivendell possess the light required to pull him back from this shadow." Aragorn looked up at the two armored giants, his face pale with desperation. "He will not make it on foot. The poison moves too fast. Even if I carry him, the ford of Bruinen is many days away through treacherous terrain. The Nine will regroup and hunt us down before we cross half the distance." "Then we don't go on foot," Chief said firmly. He stood up, his towering form casting a long shadow, and looked at Optimus. Optimus Prime nodded slowly. He stepped back and reached his hands into the spatial fold. The air above Weathertop warped violently. In a shimmering, majestic display of golden light, a Unsk D-7070C Pelican gunship materialized directly out of the subspace pocket, hovering a few feet above the uneven plateau. Its twin, rear-mounted thrusters hummed with a contained, fusion-powered roar that seemed to challenge the very gravity and ancient magic of Middle-earth. The heavy troop bay doors lowered with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the sterile, brightly lit interior of the 26th century dropship. "Aragorn, get him inside." "Now," Chief ordered, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a commander in the field. "We're going to fly. A bird of iron?" Aragorn whispered in sheer, unadulterated awe, clutching the dying Frodo tightly to his chest as he stared at the hovering spacecraft. "A chariot of the stars," Optimus corrected gently. His massive form began to shift, plates sliding as he transformed back into his heavy truck mode to act as a decoy and ground scout for their flight path. "Move, Ranger," before the Nine regained their strength. As the Pelican's thrusters roared to full power, lifting the small, terrified fellowship into the night sky, the ancient, blood-stained ruins of Aman-Sul fell away below them, shrinking into the dark. Chapter 08. The Sanctuary of Starlight and Silicon. The roar of twin G75IU turbine engines tore through the ancient, heavy silence of the Bruinen Valley, a sound fundamentally alien to the pristine wilderness of Middle-earth. The Unsk D-7070C Pelican gunship, designated Victor 997, banked hard, its charcoal grey hull slick with the freezing mist of the high mountains. Inside the troop bay, the atmosphere was a jarring, surreal synthesis of 26th century military pragmatism and the desperate survival of the Third Age. Red tactical lights bathed the rugged, weather-beaten features of Aragorn. The Ranger of the North sat rigidly in a crash seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the safety harness. He was a man entirely in his element, tracking through untamed wilds, but being strapped into the belly of a flying iron beast pulling 3 Gs of acceleration tested his legendary stoicism. Beside him lay the shivering, semi-conscious form of Frodo Baggins. The hobbit's skin was translucent, tracing a roadmap of darkened, poison veins spreading from the jagged wound in his shoulder. Master Chief stood braced against the center of the airframe, ignoring the troop seats. His Mjolnir Gen 3 armor's localized electromagnets were firmly locked to the deck plating. His golden visor remained fixed unwaveringly on the rear deployment ramp. His MA-40 assault rifle held at the low ready. "Chief, we have a severe problem," the weapon's voice chirped through his neural link, her holographic avatar flickering with cascading amber warnings on his internal HUD. "The Nazgul aren't just following our flight path. They're phasing. The atmospheric density 50 meters behind the craft is spiking into the negatives. They're drawing on the unseen world to bypass our airspeed advantage. They are literally cheating physics to catch up." Outside the reinforced hull, the screech of the nine rose above the ear-splitting whine of the fusion turbines. It was a sound that bypassed the Pelican's advanced acoustic, dampening a metaphysical blade of pure terror that curdled the air and made Aragorn wince. Theta 997, this is Optimus Prime. I have reached the perimeter of the ford. The voice of the Autobot leader rumbled over the encrypted Unsk comms, as steady and immovable as a tectonic plate. The water of this river carries an ancient, powerful resonance. I can feel the life force of the valley humming within it. Deploy the hobbits at the water's edge. I shall hold the crossing. Copy that, Prime, Chief replied, his voice a calm anchor in the chaos. He turned his helmet toward Aragorn, who was staring out the small troop bay viewport at the rapidly approaching, shimmering landscape of the elven borders. We're dropping. Hold on to the halfling. Prepare for high-G deceleration. The Pelican didn't bother to land. It performed a violent combat flare. The thrusters screamed, kicking up a localized hurricane of mist and displaced water as the 70-ton gunship hovered mere inches above the churning white rapids of the ford of Bruinen. The rear ramp dropped with a hydraulic hiss. Master Chief leaped out into the freezing, waist-deep current, immediately establishing a firing perimeter. Aragorn followed close behind, holding the dying Frodo tightly to his chest as he waded toward the far bank. From the ancient pine trees on the opposite shore, a brilliant white horse, a majestic descendant of Nahar, burst forth. Arwen and Omil, her face a breathtaking vision of elven grace and steel-cold determination, rode swiftly toward them, but as she approached the shallows, she skidded her mount to a violent halt. The horse reared up, whinnying in sheer terror. Towering behind the Spartan, having just stepped through a shimmering, golden fold of the infinite spatial dimension storage, was Optimus Prime. He stood 32 feet tall, his massive armor a brilliant, anime-vivid cobalt and crimson that seemed to defy the muted, misty grays of the morning. The sheer scale and perfection of his mechanical form radiated a divine, imposing presence. In his right hand, he held his Ennigan axe, the massive orange plasma blade hissing and spitting clouds of steam as it met the freezing rain. Daughter of Elrond, Optimus's voice boomed, melodic, powerful, and lacking any malice. He slowly lowered his weapon in a gesture of peace. Take the halfling. The shadows of the past are at our heels, but they shall not pass the threshold of the light. Arwen stared, her ageless elven eyes perceiving the world differently than men. She looked past the titanium and polyalloy, past the fusion reactors and Ennigan lines, and saw what fueled them. She saw two spirits of immense, indomitable will, one a focused ember of emerald survival, the other a blazing sun of ancient compassion. She nodded, a look of profound wonder crossing her face. Aragorn hastily handed Frodo up to her saddle. Without another word, Arwen spurred her horse, splashing across the river toward the safety of Rivendell. As her horse's hooves struck the dry stones of the far bank, the tree line on the western shore exploded. The nine, mounted on their black, necrotic steeds, surged headlong into the shallows. They stopped abruptly, their horses screaming and foaming at the mouth, as the lords of Mordor found their path blocked not by a lone elf lord, but by two walking anomalies of iron and fire. Master Chief raised his MA-40, his stance wide and unyielding, the water rushing harmlessly against his greaves. Prime, tactical assessment. They fear the river, John, for it is touched by the valor. But they fear the light more, Optimus replied, his sapphire optics burning with a fierce, blinding blue fire that pierced the gloom. Let us show them that the freedom of this world is guarded by more than just ancient swords. The Witch King of Angmar, his dark robe swirling in the unnatural wind he brought with him, raised his Morgul blade. The very sky above the Bruinen seemed to darken, the clouds bruising purple and black as he spurred his terrified horse forward into the water. Optimus Prime didn't wait to be charged. He moved with a speed that utterly defied his tremendous mass, a blur of highly calibrated mechanical motion. He slammed his Ennigan axe downward, not into the race, but directly into the center of the riverbed. He did not strike to destroy, he struck to channel the pure, uncorrupted energy of the matrix of leadership, and his Cybertronian spark flooded into the water. Simultaneously, the weapon, processing billions of calculations a second, synchronized with the hovering Pelican's external communication arrays. She emitted a highly concentrated, high-frequency sonic pulse, a localized shockwave designed specifically to disrupt the Nazgul's spectral cohesion. "Now!" Chief shouted. He opened fire. Controlled 3-round bursts of armor-piercing 7.62 mm tungsten rounds tore across the river. The bullets didn't kill the wraiths, their physical forms were already dead, but the sheer, staggering kinetic force battered their physical anchors, halting their charge and throwing them off balance. Then, the river rose. It wasn't just the ancient magic of Elrond, nor the raw power of Ulmo, Lord of Waters. Channeled and amplified through Optimus's Cybertronian technology, the flood took the shape of a thundering, mountainous stampede of horses. But these beasts were made of crystal blue water, glowing from within with electrified, plasma blue spray. The flood crashed into the Nine with the force of a collapsing star. The Nazgul were instantly swept away, their obsidian steeds crushed, their unholy shrieks completely drowned out and lost in the deafening, electrified roar of the Bruinen. As the water settled, the ford was empty. The shadow had been broken. Frodo Baggins watched the glowing water recede from the safety of Arwen's saddle, the light fading from his eyes as the poison finally pulled him under into darkness. The last homely house days later, the heavy, ringing silence of Imladris was broken only by the musical, cascading sound of waterfalls and the soft, distant humming of elven harps. Frodo Baggins slowly opened his eyes to a ceiling of intricately carved, pale white oak. The bed beneath him was soft, woven from fine silks. The air smelled of ancient pine, old books, and a strange, sterile, metallic scent he had come to associate with his Outlander protectors, a distinct blend of ozone and antiseptic biofoam. "Where am I?" he whispered, his throat dry. "You are in the House of Elrond," a warm, familiar voice replied. It was Gandalf, sitting in a wooden chair by the bed, his ancient face etched with profound relief and weariness. But as Frodo turned his head, he gasped, his heart skipping a beat. Standing quietly in the corner of the sunlit room, observing him, was the Master Chief. For the first time since they had met, the Spartan's helmet was off. John 117's face was shockingly pale, a testament to a life lived inside armor and the sterile corridors of starships. His features were rugged, framed by closely cropped hair, and heavily scarred, but it was his eyes that struck Frodo the most. They carried the unfathomable, heavy weight of 1,000 battlefields and countless lost comrades, yet they were surprisingly, deeply kind. The chief was wearing a simple, utilitarian unskishu grey tunic and trousers, his massive, augmented frame making the delicate, elegant elven furniture around him look like fragile children's toys. "You're stable, kid," Chief said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that lacked the usual metallic synthesis of his helmet. The weapon and Lord Elrond worked together. It was a complex mix of ancient elven medicine and 26th century molecular cellular repair. That shard of Morgul steel was nasty. It was actively rewriting your DNA. But we successfully neutralized the necrotic spread. "You're going to be okay." Frodo blinked, trying to process the concept of molecular repair, before giving up and focusing on what he understood. The giant? Where is Optimus? Gandalf smiled, pulling on his pipe, though it was unlit. "Optimus is in the Valley Gardens," the wizard said, gesturing toward the open balcony doors. Frodo sat up slowly, feeling a dull ache in his shoulder, and looked out over the railing. Down below, amidst the falling golden leaves of the autumn trees, sat Optimus Prime. He had utilized his adaptive transformation cog to shrink his form to a slightly more manageable 20 feet, sitting cross-legged on a massive expanse of reinforced stone. Several elven children were climbing bravely on his massive, armored shoulders, laughing with pure joy. Optimus was gently holding out his hand, his digits transforming with a soft whir into various intricate geometric shapes and spinning holo projections to amuse them. Lord Elrond stood nearby, his hands clasped behind his back, engaged in what looked to be a very deep, philosophical conversation with the Titan of Metal. "They are the Earendil's echoes, as the elves have taken to calling them," Gandalf mused, stepping up to the balcony beside Frodo. Beings from beyond the stars, forged in the fires of a different creation, sent by the valor to stand in the breach when the strength of men fails. The council of Elrond. The atmosphere in the open-air, stone circle of the council was thick with a tension that seemed to surpass even the existential threat of the one ring lying on the pedestal in the center. Representatives of dwarves, elves, and men sat in a semicircle. They were the greatest lords and warriors of the Third Age, yet their eyes were constantly, nervously drawn to the two gifts of the Valar standing quietly behind Frodo Baggins. Optimus Prime stood as a silent, imposing sentinel. His red and blue plating had been painstakingly polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the golden, dappled sunlight of Rivendell. Beside him, Master Chief stood at parade rest, his arms loosely crossed over his chest. His Mjolnir armor was fully repaired, the scorch marks of Weathertop buffed away, rendering him a silent, emerald shadow of lethal potential. "The ring cannot stay here in Imladris," Elrond proclaimed, his voice grave, echoing off the stone. "The strength of the elves is fading. It must be taken deep into Mordor and cast into the fires of Mount Doom, where it was forged." Boromir, son of the Steward of Gondor, stood up abruptly. His eyes were bright with a desperate, consuming fire. He looked at the golden band on the pedestal, and then, slowly, he turned his gaze to the Master Chief and Optimus Prime. "Why do we speak of hidden paths, shadows, and small hopes?" Boromir's voice rang out, laced with the exhaustion of a man who had fought a losing war his entire life. "We have here the weapons of the gods themselves. He pointed a trembling finger at the chief, who carries a thunder stick that can fell a dozen armored orcs in a single breath. And he looked up at Optimus, awe and ambition warring in his eyes, a giant of iron who can shatter mountains and command the rivers. "Give the ring to Gondor. Let me take it to my father. With your star metal strength, and the commanding power of the ring, we could crush Sauron beneath our heels. We could save my people." A heavy silence fell over the council. Optimus Prime stepped forward. The very ground vibrated slightly under his immense weight. His glowing sapphire optics locked onto Boromir's fevered gaze. "Strength is not defined by the sheer power to destroy, son of Gondor, but by the discipline and will to protect," Optimus said. His voice carried the accumulated authority and tragedy of 100 generations of Cybertronian primes. "The ring does not offer victory. It offers only a different flavor of tyranny. To use the enemy's weapon is to eventually become the enemy you sought to defeat. I have seen my own world, a world of unparalleled technological wonder, burn to ash because of the blinding hunger for such ultimate power. The war for these all-spark tore my people apart. I will not stand by and see this beautiful, fragile world follow that same dark path. We will not use it." Master Chief uncrossed his arms, the servos in his suit letting out a soft, threatening hiss. He looked directly at Boromir. "I've fought wars for 30 years, Boromir," Chief said, his voice cold, flat, and stripped of any romanticism. "I've seen what happens when desperate people try to control an apocalyptic power they don't fully understand. It doesn't save anyone, it just makes the casualty reports longer. The ring is a biological and spiritual parasite. We are here to end this war, not to inherit it. You will not touch the ring." Boromir swallowed hard, the absolute, unyielding certainty of the two warriors extinguishing the fire in his chest. He slowly sank back into his chair, defeated by the logic of men who had seen the stars burn. "Then it is settled," Elrond said softly, sensing the crisis had passed. "The ring must be destroyed, but the road is perilous. Who will take it?" Frodo stood up. He looked incredibly small among the lords and warriors, but his voice was clear. "I will take it, though I do not know the way." Gandalf stood immediately, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I will help you bear this burden, Frodo, as long as it is yours to bear." "And I," Aragorn said, rising from the shadows to stand beside the hobbit. "And my axe," Gimli the dwarf shouted, glaring defiantly at the elves. "And my bow," Legolas added smoothly, stepping into the circle. Master Chief stepped forward, his heavy, magnetic boots echoing loudly on the ancient stone. He didn't offer a grandiose speech. He looked at Frodo, then at Elrond. "You're going to need someone to watch the perimeter and handle heavy contact. I'm in." Optimus Prime knelt, his massive, articulated hand coming to rest gently on the stone near Frodo's feet. "You shall not walk this dark path alone, Frodo Baggins. I shall be your shield against the terror. While there is a single spark left in my chest, I will ensure that the freedom of all sentient beings in this world is preserved." 10 companions, Elrond mused, looking over the eclectic assembly. "You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring." "Actually, Lord Elrond," the weapon's bright, digital voice suddenly chimed in from the chief's shoulder, her blue holographic form shimmering into view, hands on her hips. "Make it 11. Someone has to calculate the trajectory of the artillery and manage the slip space storage inventory. I'm coming too." A rare, fleeting smile crossed Elrond's face. 11. Then, the council adjourned as the sun began to set, painting the skies over Rivendell in hues of brilliant violet and gold. The Fellowship was forged an unprecedented blend of ancient, earthy magic, noble bloodlines, and the absolute pinnacle of two distant, interstellar futures. As they prepared to leave the safety of the sanctuary of starlight, high above them, the Unsk Infinity, still safely hidden in the spatial fold, began to recalibrate its long-range topographical scanners. The brutal, frozen pass of Caradhras and the pitch-black road to Moria lay ahead. The shadows were already gathering in the deep places of the world, preparing to test the resolve of the new Fellowship. But as Optimus Prime stood tall against the twilight, and the Master Chief loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle, the enemy in the east remained unaware of one crucial fact. The Age of Iron and Grace had truly begun, and they were bringing the fire of the stars with them. Chapter 09. The echoes of the deep and the wool of the spark. The departure from Imladris was a profound symphony of golden light and bittersweet silence. As the morning sun finally crested the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the misty mountains, painting the hidden valley of Rivendell in vibrant hues of amber and rose, the newly formed Fellowship of the Ring stepped across the threshold of the last homely house. To the ancient elves watching from the high, carved balconies, it was a sight that bordered on the mythological. It was a convergence of epochs, a moment that the grand music of the Aina had never explicitly foretold. Magic, mortality, and the cold, unyielding precision of a distant future walked shoulder to shoulder. At the center of the column walked the hobbits, 4 small beacons of fragile life clad in elven cloaks that seemed to shimmer with the colors of the forest. Beside them paced Aragorn, his grey eyes already fixed on the southern horizon, and Boromir, whose gauntleted hand stayed perpetually, nervously near the hilt of his great sword. Legolas and Gimli followed side by side, a sudden study in the contrasting, ancient grace of the deep woods and the stubborn sturdiness of the mountain heart. Leading them all was Gandalf the Grey, his wooden staff thrumming with a faint, anticipatory white light. But it was the rear guard that commanded the absolute awe of the world. Master Chief, Spartan John 117, moved with a silent, predatory economy of motion. His olive-drab Mjolnir Gen 3 armor was now etched with faint, elegant elven runes of protection across the breastplate, a parting gift from Elrond's master smiths. The runes shimmered with a pale, ethereal blue light when the shadows grew too deep, actively interacting with the suit's energy shielding. Towering over them all, acting as a moving monument, was Optimus Prime. Having utilized his infinite spatial dimension storage to miniaturize his immense frame to a modest 18 feet, he moved with a rhythmic, mechanical dignity that shook the earth. His sapphire optics scanned the ridgelines with the precision of a celestial god, his very presence acting as a mobile fortress of hope for the smaller beings in his shadow. The empty lands and the watching sky for 40 grueling days, they journeyed south through the desolate, rocky lands of Hollin. The world here felt thin and hollow, as if the joyful memory of the ancient elven smiths of a region had finally faded into the very stones they walked upon. To the Master Chief, the silence was not peaceful, it was a tactical vacuum waiting to be filled. He continuously utilized the UNSC Infinity's orbital sensor arrays channeled seamlessly through the Valor's spatial fold by the weapon to map the terrain kilometers ahead, turning the fog of war into a grid of calculated probabilities. "Chief," the weapon's digital voice whispered directly into his neural interface, her blue holographic avatar reflecting softly off the interior of his golden visor. "The atmospheric density is shifting erratically. I'm picking up localized thermal spikes riding on the northern wind. It's not fire, it registers more like biological malice. And the crows, the Crebane from Dunland, they're not just birds foraging. Their flight patterns are strictly algorithmic. They're running a sweeping search grid." "Aragorn," Chief said, his voice a low, disciplined rasp that cut through the wind. He raised a single, armored fist, bringing the column to an immediate halt. "Contacts. Multiple aerial scouts, coming in fast from the south. They're running a pattern." Aragorn looked up, his grey eyes narrowing as he spotted the distant, swirling black cloud. "Spies of Saruman. Hide. Cover the fire." In an instant, the Fellowship scrambled beneath the jagged, overhanging outcrops of grey basalt. Optimus Prime did not simply hide. He performed a breathtaking, anime-inspired transformation that defied his mass. In a blur of sliding plates, venting steam, and rotating gears, he flattened his massive chassis against the dark rock face. Activating his adaptive camouflage, his vibrant cobalt and crimson colors shifted rapidly to a matte, non-reflective gray. He locked his servos, becoming indistinguishable from the mountain itself, a gargantuan, dormant gargoyle of iron and will. A massive cloud of blackbirds swept overhead, their harsh, croaking cries tearing through the absolute silence of Hollin. They felt the cold, calculating gaze of the Spartan and the hidden, atomic heat of the Prime, but the Valor's veil a localized, magic-infused cloaking field generated by the weapon interfacing with the elven runes shielded the Fellowship's true nature from the beast's corrupted eyes. Once the scouts had passed, Gandalf leaned heavily on his staff, his face grim. "The passage of the south is closed to us. Saruman has turned his dark gaze toward the Gap of Rohan. We must take the mountain." He looked up at the cruel, jagged, white peaks of Caradhras. The fury of the cruel peak, the ascent of the mountain, was a brutal, unforgiving test of biological and mechanical endurance. The wind did not just blow, it howled with a sentient, malicious fury. It was a freezing gale that tasted of old, buried hatred, seeking to push them off the narrow ledge. For the hobbits, every agonizing step through the knee-deep drifts was a desperate battle against the encroaching, sleep-inducing numbness of death. Optimus Prime took the lead. He walked at the absolute front of the line, his massive, heavily treaded feet carving a deep, wide trench through the waist-deep snow so the hobbits and Gimli could follow easily in his wake. As the blizzard intensified, Optimus deliberately opened his massive chest plates. He allowed the radiant, azure heat of the matrix of leadership to spill out over the group, creating a localized, glowing pocket of warmth that kept the hobbits from freezing solid. "I have seen stars die in the absolute, freezing vacuum of deep space," Optimus rumbled, his voice echoing against the sheer rock face, louder than the storm. "But this cold, it is not merely born of the air. It is a voice. It is a command." High above them, on the jagged pinnacle of the mountain, a voice did indeed scream. Saruman the White stood upon the black tower of Orthanc miles away, his corrupted will channeled directly through the mountain's peak. "Huver enmorka Karnarase, nigh enmorka elen siluva." Lightning struck the peaks with a deafening crack. The sheer sonic force sent massive, building-sized avalanches of ancient ice and stone tumbling directly toward the narrow ledge where the Fellowship stood. "Chief, look out!" Legolas cried, his keen elven senses screaming a warning a fraction of a second before the snow broke. Master Chief didn't look. He reacted. He violently engaged his Mjolnir thruster pack. The twin blue flames vaporized the snow around him as he surged upward. In midair, he grabbed Frodo and Sam by their thick cloaks, tucking them protectively against his reinforced, titanium chest piece. With his free hand, he slammed his energy sword deep into the solid rock face, the plasma blade melting the stone to create an unbreakable anchor. He held them tight against the cliff as a wall of white death roared overhead. Optimus Prime stood his ground in the center of the path. He didn't flinch. As the avalanche struck him, he deployed his energon shield, generating a massive, translucent orange dome of pure kinetic force. The thousands of tons of snow and ice broke against him like ocean water against a seawall, parting around the giant and sparing Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli huddled behind him. When the deafening roar finally subsided, the Fellowship emerged, half buried but miraculously alive. "He is trying to bring the very mountain down upon us," Gandalf shouted over the shrieking gale, leaning on Aragorn. "We must turn back. The pass is closed." "And go where?" Boromir cried, his face caked in ice, his voice thick with frustration. "To the Gap of Rohan? To walk straight into the trap of the Uruk-hai?" "There is another way," Gimli whispered. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of profound fear and deep, ancestral longing. "The mines of Moria. My cousin Balin is lord there. He would give us a royal welcome. We would be safe from the sky." Gandalf's face paled beneath his frozen beard. He looked at the Master Chief, standing like a green statue, and then at Optimus, whose optics burned through the blizzard. He saw the cold, unyielding logic in the Spartan's stance and the ancient, protective fire in the Prime's eyes. "So be it," Gandalf said, his voice heavy with a dread he could not hide. "We shall go through the dark." The Watcher in the water, the doors of Durin, stood silent, flush, and imposing against the towering, dark cliffs of the Silvertine. The lake before them was a stagnant mirror of oily water, as black as a crow's wing and utterly still. To the Master Chief, the water didn't just look quiet, it looked unnatural. His advanced senses detected rhythmic, massive thermal pulses from the crushing depths, something impossibly large, ancient, and very, very hungry. "The weapon. Give me a sonar and thermal status on the lake," Chief commanded, his hand hovering instinctively over the grip of his battle rifle. "Chief, I'm picking up a mass signature that defies our biological databases," she replied immediately, her avatar flickering with genuine alarm. "It has 19 distinct appendages, each measuring over 30 meters long. Its neural activity is ancient, primitive, and highly aggressive. It's aware of us. Don't touch the water." As Gandalf struggled with the translation of the elvish riddle etched in Ithildin on the doors, "Speak, friend," and enter, heavy, suffocating tension settled over the group. Boromir, frustrated, weary, and seeking to break the silence, picked up a large stone and callously tossed it into the black water. Each ripple sent a violent shiver through the Spartan's motion tracker. "Sop," Chief barked, his metallic voice cut through the air like a whip crack. "You're pinging an apex predator." Boromir scoffed, turning to argue, but before he could retort, Frodo spoke up, his eyes locked on the glowing elvish script. "It's a riddle." "Gandalf, what is the elvish word for friend?" "Melon," Gandalf said softly. The solid stone doors groaned, the ancient internal gears grinding loudly after centuries of silence. As the doors swung smoothly inward, revealing a yawning darkness that seemed to actively swallow the starlight, the lake behind them erupted. A gargantuan tentacle, slick with foul-smelling slime and tipped with jagged, bony hooks, lashed out of the water like a whip. It wrapped tightly around Frodo's ankle, dragging him violently toward the black depths. "Frodo!" Sam screamed, hacking desperately at the massive limb with his small barrow blade, but the ancient iron merely bounced off the rubbery hide. Master Chief was a blur of emerald motion. He didn't fire his rifle, the high-velocity splashback of shattered stone and water would hit the hobbits. Instead, he engaged his wrist-mounted grapple shot. The high-tensile cable snapped out with a sharp crack, anchoring deeply into the thick flesh of the tentacle. He hauled himself forward, his Mjolnir servos whining as they generated maximum torque. In midair, he ignited his energy sword. The twin blades of superheated plasma hissed violently as they sliced through the massive appendage like a hot wire through wax, instantly cauterizing the wound. Frodo fell free onto the rocks, but 20 more tentacles rose from the deep, thrashing the water into a white froth. The Watcher in the water fully emerged, a terrifying, bulbous nightmare of pale, bloated flesh and gnashing, multi-road maws. "Retreat to the mountain." Optimus Prime roared. He transformed in a deafening symphony of clashing metal, his massive feet locking firmly into the shoreline to anchor himself. From his heavy forearm housings, he deployed his twin ion blasters. He didn't fire at the beast's fleshy body. The creature was too massive to kill quickly. Instead, he fired directly at the water's surface immediately surrounding the beast. The superheated plasma bolts created massive, localized steam explosions, boiling the water instantly and blinding the creature in a scalding cloud of white vapor. "Chief, get them inside. I will hold the gate," Optimus bellowed, laying down a suppressing barrage. The Fellowship scrambled frantically into the dark hall. Aragorn and Boromir dragged the hobbits across the threshold. Master Chief stood at the entrance, acting as the ultimate choke point, firing his assault rifle in disciplined, 3-round bursts, methodically popping the Watcher's multiple glowing eyes as they lunged through the steam. Optimus Prime slowly backed toward the door, his blasters never ceasing their rhythmic, booming fire. As he finally reached the entrance, the Watcher, in a final act of blind, agonizing spite, slammed its massive bulk weight against the ancient stone arches above the door. "Prime, look out above," the weapon screamed in Chief's ear. The mountain itself seemed to collapse. Massive, car-sized blocks of stone crashed down toward the doorway. Optimus Prime dropped his weapons and braced himself, his heavy hydraulics screaming in protest as he caught a 10-ton slab of falling rock on his broad shoulders. He held the crumbling entrance open just long enough for the chief to dive inside, grabbing the Prime's arm to help pull him clear. With a final, deafening crash, the doors were sealed forever by the rubble. The pale light of the moon and stars was gone. The long dark silence fell over the Fellowship, heavy, dusty, and absolute. The only illumination in the vast cavern came from the glowing crystal atop Gandalf's staff and the soft, tactical blue and green glow of the Master Chief's armor lights. "We have but one choice now," Gandalf said, his voice echoing endlessly in the vast, cold halls of Khazad-dûm. "We must go through the long dark of Moria. Be on your guard, all of you. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world." Master Chief smoothly clicked his rifle into its magnetic holster on his back and drew his suppressed M6K sidekick pistol, a weapon better suited for tight, dark corridors. He switched his visor to enhanced night vision. The pitch-black world instantly turned a sharp, digital green. He saw the tragic reality of Gimli's dream, the scattered, rusted skeletons of dwarves, the thick dust of ages covering broken weapons, and the vast, yawning chasms that led deep into the heart of the world. Optimus Prime stood tall behind him, his shoulder-mounted floodlights illuminating the path ahead, casting long, heroic shadows against the dwarven pillars. "Freedom," Optimus whispered, the word carrying a heavy weight in the tomb of a fallen kingdom, is often found in the darkest of places. But where there is light and where there is unity, the shadow cannot endure. As they began their long, tense trek into the bowels of the earth, the Fellowship felt the crushing physical weight of the mountain above them, but they also felt the unbreakable strength of the titans who walked among them. The chapter of the dark had begun, and far below them, in the absolute deep, the drums, the slow, rhythmic, terrifying drums of the enemy were already beginning to beat. The Fellowship of Iron and Magic moved forward, locked into a fate that would change the history of two universes forever. Chapter 10. The Shadow of the Abyss and the Flame of the Spark. The darkness of Moria was not merely the absence of light, it was a physical weight. To the organic members of the Fellowship, it felt as though the roots of the misty mountains were pressing down directly upon their lungs, exhaling a breath of cold stone dust and ancient, unspoken sorrow. But for the two giants of a distant future, the darkness was simply another theater of war, battlefield waiting to be defined by tactical geometry and disciplined action. Master Chief moved precisely at the center of the column, flanked closely by the hobbits. His olive-drab Mjolnir Gen 3 armor emitted a low, rhythmic hum, the thrum of a microfusion reactor that was the only steady sound in the sepulchral silence of Khazad-dûm. His polarized visor was set to a multispectral overlay. Thermal sonar and LiDAR pinged the gargantuan, impossible geometry of the Dwaraldelf, rendering the pitch-black abyss as a wireframe map of sharp greens and blues in his HUD. Beside him, taking the vanguard, Optimus Prime had compressed his massive frame into a compact, battle-ready bipedal form. He moved with a hushed, hydraulic grace that belied his massive tonnage, his sapphire optics dimmed to a subtle, ambient glow to avoid acting as a beacon for the eyes of the deep. The weapon, Chief whispered into his internal comms, his voice a flat, emotionless subvocal vibration. Status on those thermal spikes. Give me the vector. The blue holographic AI appeared in his peripheral vision, her digital expression uncharacteristically grim. Chief, the deeper we descend, the more the sensors are glitching. The telemetry doesn't make sense. There's a massive localized distortion directly below us, moving parallel to our path. It's not just a heat source, it's an entropy sink. Whatever is down there is actively eating the ambient energy of the mountain. And the goblins, they've stopped tracking us. They're hiding from it, Chief. Optimus Prime turned his massive, silver-plated head, his internal gears grinding with a musical, heavy precision. I feel it too, John. A jagged ripple in the matrix of leadership. A shadow that was born before the first sun rose over this world. This mountain is no longer a tomb for the dwarves. It is a cage for something far worse. The chamber of Mazarbel, the Fellowship entered the ruined tomb of Balin with a collective gasp of grief. Gimli the dwarf wailed, a sound of profound heartbreak, falling heavily to his knees before the sun-bleached, cracked stone of the sarcophagus. As Gandalf read the final, frantic, blood-stained words of the Book of Records, drums, drums in the deep. They are coming. The suffocating silence of Moria was violently shattered. Boom, boom, boom. It was a sound that vibrated in the marrow of the hobbit's bones and rattled the ammunition counters in the chief's HUD. It was the terrifying heartbeat of the mountain itself, accelerating with a primitive, insatiable hunger. Pippin, Boromir hissed violently as the young hobbit accidentally backed into a skeletal corpse perched on the edge of a deep well. The skeleton, wearing rusted chainmail, tumbled backward with an iron bucket, clattering down into the abyss for what felt like an eternity, echoing like a war gong through the deep places. Master Chief didn't wait for the final echo to fade. He knew what happened when an enemy was alerted to a fortified position. He reached his left hand into the empty air, accessing the infinite spatial dimension storage granted by the Valor. With a sudden shimmer of golden light, he pulled out an M41 SBNKR rocket launcher and tossed it seamlessly to Aragorn. Point and shoot, Ranger. Watch the back blast, Chief commanded, while he smoothly drew his own MA-40 assault rifle. Shields up. Fellowship. To me, Optimus Prime roared. He stepped directly in front of the heavy wooden doors of the chamber, his massive frame expanding. Plates of cobalt and crimson shifted and locked with a series of sharp, deafening metallic clacks. From his heavy forearm housings, he deployed his Energon shields, two massive, translucent orange barriers of pure, crackling kinetic force that entirely filled the doorway. The heavy wooden doors splintered outward under immense pressure. A tide of goblins, green-skinned, wide-eyed with malice, and armed with crude iron scimitars, surged forward. But they didn't hit elven wood or dwarven stone. They hit the unyielding, superheated light of Cybertron. Freedom, Optimus thundered, his voice shaking dust from the ceiling as his massive Energon axe ignited in his right hand with a roar of blue plasma flame, is the right of all sentient beings. But you chose the path of the shadow. Return to it. He swung. The axe didn't just cut. The localized plasma heat instantly vaporized the front ranks of the orcs. The goblins were tossed back like dry, burning leaves in a hurricane. Behind the Prime's towering shield, the Master Chief was a blur of emerald motion. In an anime-inspired display of Spartan time, John 117 moved through the chaotic room with superhuman speed and lethal geometry. He didn't waste ammo. His rifle spit controlled, suppressed 3-round bursts of armor-piercing 7.62 mm tungsten that popped goblin skulls with cold, clinical efficiency. Then, the floor shook, a rhythmic pounding distinct from the drums. A cave troll, massive, grey-skinned, and heavily armored in rusted iron plates, lumbered into the chamber. It swung a massive iron chain and roared with blind fury. "Troll!" Legolas shouted, rapidly firing 3 arrows that merely bounced off the creature's thick, leathery hide. Master Chief didn't hesitate. He engaged his wrist-mounted grapple shot. The high-tensile cable snapped out, hooking securely into the troll's spiked iron shoulder pauldron. He hauled himself violently upward, his suit servos screaming as he flew over the beast's massive head. Mid-air, upside down, he pulled a Unsk fragmentation grenade from his tactical belt, primed it with his thumb, and jammed it directly into the troll's roaring, open maw as he somersaulted past. Crunch. Pock. The muffled explosion was contained entirely within the creature's skull. The troll's massive head slumped, acrid smoke pouring from its throat and nostrils as it crashed lifelessly to the stone floor, shaking the room. The hobbits cheered, a brief, hysterical sound, but the joy was brutally short-lived. The drums stopped. A new sound replaced them, a sound of crackling, roaring flame, accompanied by a roar that sounded as if the earth itself was screaming in agony. The bridge of Khazad-dûm, the Fellowship, flared through the vast, echoing hall of 1,000 pillars, the Master Chief and Optimus Prime acting as the heavy rearguard. Behind them, the darkness was no longer empty. A glow, a deep, sickly, suffocating orange, began to illuminate the distant, towering arches. "What is this new devilry?" Boromir gasped, struggling to catch his breath, his heavy shield trembling in his grip. Gandalf stopped dead in his tracks. His face was pale, his ancient eyes wide with a terror rarely seen in a mare. His staff glowed with a desperate, blinding white light. "A Balrog," Gandalf breathed, "a demon of the ancient world, flame and shadow. This foe is beyond any of you." "Not all of us," Optimus Prime said, his voice dropping into a deep register of absolute, unyielding resolve. He looked down at the Master Chief, the 2 soldiers sharing an unspoken understanding forged in the fires of impossible odds. "John, get the hobbits safely across the bridge. Secure the far side. I will stand with the wizard." "Optimus, that thing is a walking nuclear meltdown," the weapon warned frantically, her avatar flashing bright red on Chief's HUD. "My thermal scanners are literally melting just trying to quantify its heat output. It's composed of pure, corrupted plasma and necrotic energy." The Balrog emerged fully from the shadows. It was a terrifying titan of living fire and choking black smoke, a winged nightmare that dwarfed even the massive form of Optimus Prime. It carried a whip of multi-lashed flame that cracked against the stone pillars, instantly melting the ancient rock into glowing slag. Master Chief paused at the edge of the narrow, vertiginous stone bridge. He looked at Gandalf, the old man who had become an unexpected mentor and friend in this strange, beautiful land, and then at Optimus, his brother-in-arms from another star. The chief reached deep into the spatial storage and pulled out a massive Type 2 energy weapon / hammer, brute gravity hammer. The head of the weapon hummed with a violent, violet kinetic energy that distorted the air around it. "I'm staying," Chief said, his voice flat, his stance immovable. "No," Gandalf commanded, turning to face them, his voice echoing with the overwhelming, divine power of his true form as a mayor. "Fly, you fools. The ring must reach the fire. Optimus, Master Chief, you must protect the halfling. If he falls, both your worlds are forfeit. That is the mission." Optimus Prime hesitated. His spark burned with the fierce desire to fight, to protect his friends, to stand against the dark. But he saw the absolute truth in Gandalf's eyes. This was a battle of ancient spirits, not just steel and plasma. To intervene might disrupt a fate older than the stars. As the Master Chief reluctantly grabbed Aragorn's shoulder, shoving him toward the bridge, the Fellowship scrambled across the precarious span. Gandalf stood alone in the center. The Balrog leaped, landing heavily on the near side of the bridge, the heat from its body singing the hair on Aragorn's arms from 50 feet away. "You shall not pass," Gandalf roared, raising his glowing staff and striking the bridge with blinding force. The ancient stone cracked with the sound of thunder. The bridge broke beneath the demon's immense weight. The Balrog fell with a roar of surprise into the bottomless abyss, but in its dying spite, its whip lashed out, wrapping tightly around Gandalf's ankle. "Gandalf!" Frodo screamed, lunging forward, only to be caught by Boromir. The wizard was dragged down, hanging precariously by his fingertips to the crumbling edge. In that split second, Master Chief moved. He fired his grapple shot, the high-tensile line zipping toward Gandalf's heavy belt, but the Balrog's shadow was an active anti-energy field. The titanium cable withered, corroded, and snapped like a dry twig the moment it touched the darkness rising from the pit. Optimus Prime reached out his massive hand, his hydraulic fingers mere inches from the wizard's grasp. "Gandalf, take my hand." Gandalf looked up. He saw the Titan of Metal and the Soldier of Green, two legends sent by the Valar, desperately trying to save him. He smiled a small, knowing, profoundly weary smile. "Fly, you fools." He let go, falling into the dark. The silence that followed, as the remaining members of the Fellowship stared into the abyss, was louder than the roar of the Balrog. The outskirts of Lothlorien, the Fellowship burst from the east gate of Moria, stumbling blindly into the harsh, blinding sunlight of the Dimrill Dale. They collapsed onto the soft, green grass, the sound of sobbing hobbits filling the crisp mountain air. Master Chief stood apart from the group, his helmet still sealed, staring back at the dark, jagged hole in the side of the mountain. He checked his HUD with mechanical routine, a coping mechanism for grief. Ammo 40%, shields 100%, heart rate elevated. He felt a distinct, hollow ache in his chest that no amount of biofoam could fix. He had lost commanders before Captain Keyes Johnson, but Gandalf was the soul, the guiding light of this team. Optimus Prime walked slowly toward him, his heavy footfalls muffled by the soft earth and the crushing weight of his sorrow. He knelt beside the chief, his massive sapphire optics dimmed to a mournful twilight blue. "He chose the path of ultimate sacrifice, John," Optimus said softly, his deep voice carrying the resonance of a funeral toll. "On my world, many brave Autobots have fallen so that others may live. It is the highest honor of a true warrior to be the shield that breaks so the world remains whole. We could have saved him, Optimus," Chief said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual tactical certainty. "If I had been a fraction of a second faster, if I had used a different weapon, if we had engaged together." "No," Optimus replied, gently placing a massive, silver hand on the chief's emerald shoulder armor. "Some shadows can only be fought with their opposing light." Gandalf knew that. To interfere would have been to deny him his purpose. Now, we must honor his choice. We must be the light he believed us to be. Frodo sat near the dark waters of the Mirrormere, clutching the ring against his chest. He looked smaller than ever, his eyes red from weeping, the burden of the quest pressing down upon him. Aragorn stood up, wiping the grime and soot from his face. He looked at the two giants, the super soldier from the stars and the mechanical king of iron. He was stepping into the void left by the grey pilgrim, and he knew he needed their strength. "We cannot linger to grieve," Aragorn said, his voice thick but resolute. "By nightfall, these hills will be swarming with orcs seeking vengeance for their fallen. We must reach the safety of the woods of Galadriel. We must reach Lothlorien." Master Chief turned away from the mountain, his golden visor reflecting the harsh sunlight. He clicked a fresh magazine into his MA-40 rifle with a sharp, decisive clack. "The mission continues. Aragorn is right. Move out." As they began the long, weary trek toward the Golden Wood, high above the atmosphere, hidden in the clouds and the spatial fold, the Unsk Infinity sent a single, encrypted ping to the chief's HUD. A message from Captain Lasky flashed across his reticle. "Status, standing by. All systems green. We are mourning the wizard with you, Spartan. But we are holding the line." The Fellowship was broken, fractured by the loss of their guide. But the resolve of iron and grace was only beginning to forge into something stronger, something that could withstand the coming storm. The end of the first age of this conflict was coming, and the Shadow of Sauron would soon learn that even a demon of the ancient world could not extinguish the spark of a prime or the unbreakable will of a Spartan. Chapter 11. The Mirror of the Stars and the Breaking of the World. The transition from the lightless, suffocating depths of Moria to the ethereal, golden luminescence of Lothlorien was a profound shock to every sense, biological and artificial alike. The Fellowship moved like weary ghosts through the ancient woods of Kara's Galadhon, their heavy footsteps muffled by the thick, soft carpet of Melian leaves that glowed with a faint, internal gold. To the hobbits, it was a waking dream of the world as it should be, untouched by the malice of the East. To the Master Chief, it was an alien biome of impossible structural integrity and hyper-advanced ecological synthesis. Master Chief stood silently on a high, intricately woven flat overlooking the valley, his olive-drab Mjolnir Gen 3 armor, scarred by goblin blades and blackened by Balrog smoke, reflected the soft, silver light of the Galadhon lanterns. He had spent the last several hours in a state of high-intensity diagnostic repair. The weapon had been working tirelessly, scrubbing the lingering shadow data left by the Balrog's necrotic aura, which had attempted to overwrite the suit's power grid logic with a virus of pure entropy. "Chief," the weapon's voice whispered in the quiet sanctuary of his helmet. Her holographic avatar appeared on his palm projector. She was a translucent, digital blue, but here, her light seemed to naturally harmonize with the elven woods rather than contrast with it. "My senses are spiking, but not with a threat," she said, her voice laced with genuine awe. "This isn't just photosynthesis. The trees, they're connected. It's a biological neural network that spans the entire forest. It's like a planetary-scale supercomputer made of wood and starlight. And she's at the absolute center of it." John 117 turned his golden visor toward the center of the clearing below. Lady Galadriel and Lord Celeborn approached, their movements so fluid they seemed to glide inches above the grass. Beside them, Optimus Prime had assumed his humanoid form, though he had thoughtfully retracted his height to its absolute minimum, a towering 18 feet to avoid crushing the ancient, sacred roots. His cobalt and crimson plating, usually battle-worn and grimed with the dust of 100 worlds, had been painstakingly polished by the elven smiths until it shone with a pearlescent, almost holy luster. "The Lady of the Wood has seen much, Master Chief," Optimus said, his voice a resonant, low-frequency hum that vibrated the very air but did not disturb a single leaf. "She sees the distant stars you have traveled and the terrible, endless wars you have carried in your heart." Galadriel stopped, her eyes as deep and ancient as the sea fixed directly on the Spartan's polarized visor. She did not speak with her lips, but her voice echoed in the secret chambers of John's mind, bypassing his encrypted neural link entirely with an effortless, terrifying grace. "A child of a future forged in desperate iron," she thought. "You carry the weight of an entire species on your broad shoulders, Spartan. But here, in the heart of Elvendom, the weight of the ring is the only gravity that matters. Let us see if your iron can withstand its pull." The mirror of Galadriel that night, as the rest of the exhausted Fellowship slept in a fitful peace haunted by the memory of Gandalf's fall into the abyss. Galadriel led Frodo, the chief, and Optimus to a secluded, moonlit garden where a silver basin sat upon an elegant stone pedestal. "What is this?" Chief asked, his armored hand resting instinctively, cautiously on his sidearm. "A mirror," Galadriel replied, filling the basin with water from a silver ewer. "It shows things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass." Frodo stepped forward first. What he saw made him gasp and recoil in sheer terror, clutching the ring to his chest. But Galadriel did not comfort him yet. She turned her gaze to the Outlanders. "And you, Titan of Metal? You, Warrior of the Stars? Will you look?" Optimus Prime knelt, the massive servos in his legs hissing softly. He peered into the still water. In a visual flare that defied the water's surface, the basin didn't just reflect, it projected. Optimus saw Cybertron, not as a dead, metallic ruin, but as a paradise restored, whole, and gleaming by the absolute power of the One Ring. He saw himself sitting upon a towering throne of gold, the ring resting upon his massive finger. But as he looked closer, the joy turned to ash. The faces of his fellow Autobots were gone, replaced by mindless, red-eyed machines of war, stripped of their individuality. The freedom he loved had been replaced by an absolute, terrifying, unified order. "I have seen enough," Optimus said. He closed his eyes, his optics dimming to a solemn, grieving blue. The ring offers a restoration that is but a gilded grave. I will not trade the sovereign soul of my people for the mere survival of their bodies. Then the Master Chief stepped forward. In the dark water, John saw the Unsk. He saw the Infinity and her sister ships, bolstered and shielded by the ring's dark power. He saw human fleets sweeping across the galaxy in an unstoppable tidal wave, erasing the Covenant, the Banished, and the Foreigner remnants in a matter of days. Peace was finally achieved. But the peace he saw was enforced by a Master Chief who had become a God Emperor of mankind. His humanity had been completely stripped away, leaving only a cold, hyper-efficient killing machine that ruled the stars through absolute, paralyzing fear. "Chief, don't look," the weapon warned, her voice trembling in his ear. "It's a lie. It's a manipulation of your core tactical objectives. It's trying to rewrite your mission parameters." John 117 straightened up, his visor reflecting only the silver water and the stars above. "I've spent my entire life following orders to save humanity," he said, his voice flat and unyielding. "I won't be the reason they lose what makes them human in the first place." Galadriel smiled, a sad, profoundly knowing expression that seemed to acknowledge the immense burden both warriors carried. "You have passed the test, both of you. The law of power cannot crack a foundation built on sacrifice, but the road ahead is darker than the mines you have left." The gifts of Lorien. The next morning, as the Fellowship prepared to depart in the elegant swan-prowed elven boats, Galadriel bestowed her gifts. To the hobbits, she gave cloaks of stealth and elven rope. To Legolas, a great bow of the Galadrim. But for the defenders from the future, the gifts were a staggering blend of ancient myth and high-tech adaptation. For the Master Chief, she presented a specialized combat knife. Its blade was forged from a flawless composite of elven mithril and the star metal titanium found in the wreckage of the Infinity. It was etched with delicate runes that glowed with a pale, fierce light when enemies of the Free Peoples were near. 26th century sting. "And for you, the weapon," Galadriel said softly, holding out a small, intricately carved crystal phial containing the light of Erendil. "May this stabilize your core when the shadows attempt to fragment your logic." The weapon flickered into existence on Chief's shoulder, her digital hands trembling as she interfaced with the artifact, downloading the essence of the starlight into her subroutines. "Thank you, my lady. My processing speed, it's beautiful. I can see the code of the universe." Finally, she turned to Optimus Prime. She reached up and touched his massive chest plates, right over the armored housing of the Matrix of Leadership. "To you, I give a blessing of the Evening Star. Your spark shall never grow dim in this world, and your voice shall carry the authority of the kings of old when the time comes to rally the West." Optimus bowed his head, a mechanical hum of profound, ancient respect. "We shall not fail this world, Lady Galadriel, not while a single gear turns." The breaking of the Fellowship at Path Galen. The journey down the great river Anduin was a journey through a rapidly changing world. The golden, timeless warmth of Lorien faded, replaced by the rugged, grey, imposing cliffs of the Argonath. As the Fellowship pulled their small boats onto the stony shores of Path Galen, the weight of their mission became an unbearable pressure, fracturing the unity Gandalf had built. Boromir stood apart near the tree line, his eyes fixed obsessively on the ring resting against Frodo's chest. The whisper had become a deafening roar in the steward's ears. He looked at the Master Chief, standing silent and lethal, and then at the towering, immovable presence of Optimus. "Why?" Boromir muttered, his voice cracking with a desperate, feverish madness. "Why do we hide in boats like thieves? We have the Spartan. We have the Prime. Their weapons could level the Black Gate of Mordor. Why do we risk the life of a weak halfling when we have the strength of the gods themselves walking among us? Strength without wisdom is merely a faster way to ruin." "Boromir," Optimus said gently, having heard the man's muttering with his advanced audio receptors. But the poison seed was planted too deep. Boromir turned and followed Frodo into the dense woods of Amon Hen. Master Chief, however, was not looking at the woods. He was looking at the western ridgeline. His HUD was suddenly flashing a violent, strobing red. Threat detected, multiple contacts. High speed, Yorakai. No biometric matches on record. Aragorn, we've got heavy company, Chief shouted, slamming a fresh 60-round magazine into his MA-40. At that exact moment, a piercing, terrifying shriek echoed from the deep woods. Frodo had put on the ring to escape a maddened Boromir. The weapon, track that signature, Chief commanded, sprinting toward the tree line. I can't. He's shifted into the Wraith world. The localized distortion is blinding me. But Chief, the Yorakai are here. A massive force, led by a highly elevated heartbeat. Lurtz is leading them. The forest exploded. The sound of snapping branches and the rhythmic, terrifying chanting of the White Hand filled the air. Hundreds of Yorakai, heavily armored in thick, crude iron and carrying broad-bladed swords, swarmed down the steep slopes like a wave of black mud. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stood their ground at the ruins of Amon-Hen, becoming a whirlwind of elven steel, dwarven iron, and ranger fury. But the sheer, unrelenting numbers were overwhelming. Master Chief engaged his thruster pack. He became a lethal emerald blur, his assault rifle spitting fire in disciplined, devastating bursts. He moved with a brutal, anime-inspired precision, his new mithril-enhanced combat knife carving through thick Yorakai shields and armor like they were made of wet parchment. He was a demon in the eyes of the orcs, a warrior who didn't just fight. He systematically, mathematically dismantled their formations, creating mountains of the dead. Optimus, protect the boats, secure the perimeter, Chief yelled over the comms. Optimus Prime transformed. In a magnificent, ground-shaking display of shifting geometry, the massive long-nosed truck roared through the underbrush, his massive tires crushing a dozen Yorakai scouts instantly. He skidded to a halt on the shoreline and shifted violently back to his humanoid form, his twin ion blasters igniting with a blinding hum. Freedom is the right of all sentient beings, Optimus roared, his voice shaking the very leaves from the ancient trees. But for those who serve the dark, there is only the justice of the Prime. He fired. The massive, azure bolts of plasma energy vaporized the lead ranks of the Yorakai, the intense heat of the shots turning the damp earth into geysers of steam. He stood as a literal 30-foot wall of iron and fire between the enemy and the moored boats. But the battle was spreading too wide. Merry and Pippin had bravely run deeper into the woods, shouting to draw the orcs away from Frodo's escape path. Chief, the hobbits, the weapon shouted, tracking their small, frantic heat signatures. John 117 sprinted toward the sound of the Yorakai war horns. He burst into a clearing just in time to see Boromir, his body riddled with massive black arrows, fighting desperately on his knees, his horn cleaved in two. Lurtz, the massive, scarred Yorakai commander, was drawing his heavy bow for the final, lethal shot. Master Chief didn't use his rifle. He used his grapple shot. The high tensile cable snapped out, hooking securely onto Lurtz's thick, muscular arm just as he released the bowstring. The shot went wide, the black arrow thudding harmlessly into a massive oak tree. Chief hauled himself forward with terrifying speed, his Mjolnir boots hitting Lurtz's chest with the kinetic force of a falling meteor. The Yorakai leader was thrown backward 50 feet, his thick iron armor shattered into shrapnel, his spine snapped upon impact. Get to the boat, Boromir, Chief commanded, standing protectively over the fallen warrior, his shields flaring as he deflected a stray arrow. Boromir looked up, dark blood staining his pale lips. They took them, the little ones, Merry and Pippin. I failed. I tried to take the ring from Frodo. No, Aragorn said, arriving at a dead run, his sword dripping with black orc blood. He knelt beside the steward's son. You fought bravely, my brother. You kept your honor. In the distance, the heavy, rhythmic sound of the Yorakai retreating toward Isengard with their two hobbit captives echoed through the rugged hills. Optimus Prime arrived in the clearing, his massive frame scorched by black powder explosions, a testament to the sheer volume of fire he had absorbed. He looked toward the river. Frodo and Sam were already halfway across, their small elven boat a tiny speck on the vast, churning expanse of the Anduin. "The Fellowship is broken," Legolas said softly, his voice hollow as he lowered his bow. Optimus Prime stood tall, the setting sun reflecting brilliantly off his polished blue and red plating. He looked at the Master Chief, who was checking his ammo count, and then at Aragorn, who was closing Boromir's eyes for the last time. "The Fellowship has not failed," Optimus said, his voice deep, resonant, and filled with a renewed, unbreakable resolve. "It has merely changed its tactical objective." Frodo and Sam moved toward the shadow alone, but they carry the entirety of our hope. "We shall hunt these orcs. We shall rescue the small ones. And we shall show Saruman that the age of men is not yet over, especially when the future stands fiercely beside them." Master Chief clicked a fresh magazine into his rifle with a sharp clack. His visor glowed a steady, determined gold in the twilight. "Let's finish the fight." The chapter of the Fellowship ended with a choice. As the Unsk Infinity tracked the movements of the orc horde from the cold silence of the stars, the three hunters Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, now bolstered by a Spartan super soldier and a Cybertronian Prime, began their relentless pursuit across the plains of Rohan. The War of the Ring had permanently transitioned from a secret, stealth-based mission into an open, ironclad conflict. The board was set, and the Titans were moving. Chapter 12. The Sundering of Wills and the Dawn of the Iron Hunt. The air atop the ancient, weather-beaten slopes of Amon Hen was no longer the sweet, pine-scented breeze that had drifted off the great river Anduin that morning. It was thick with the heavy copper tang of fresh blood, the acrid, choking stench of black powder smoke, and the relentless, rhythmic thrum of Uruk-hai boots striking the earth. The Fellowship of the Ring, the most diverse and powerful alliance forged in the history of Middle-earth, was no longer a single, unified entity. Under the crushing pressure of the ring and the sudden, violent ambush of Isengard, it was a fragmenting constellation. Each star was beating violently, pulled by the gravity of its own inescapable destiny. Master Chief stood amidst the waist-high, ancient ferns of the Path Galen woods. His olive-drab Mjolnir Gen 3 armor was a symphony of fresh scuffs, shallow dents, and the brilliant emerald shimmer of his regenerating energy shields. His golden, polarized visor was a focal point for the dying sunlight, reflecting the utter chaos of the woods with cold, analytical precision. In his massive hands, the M40 assault rifle felt like a natural extension of his own reinforced skeleton. Every 3-round burst he fired was a clinical excision, a staccato rhythm of supersonic lead that violently punctuated the guttural roars of the White Hand. The weapon, John 117 voice was a low, disciplined rasp that bypassed his helmet's external audio dampeners. "Give me the tactical update. Where is Frodo?" The blue, holographic avatar of the AI flickered rapidly in his peripheral vision, her light dancing across his internal HUD. Her digital expression was etched with a profound anxiety that mirrored the organic chaos outside. "Chief, the neural signature of the ring is everywhere and nowhere," she reported, her voice tight. When he put it on, it shifted his entire biometric signature into the Wraith world. "It's like a massive broadcast signal being reflected off every single tree in this forest. I can't pinpoint him, but the Uruk-hai, they aren't looking for him anymore. They've found Merry and Pippin. They're converging in massive numbers on the lower western ridge." John slammed a fresh, heavy magazine into his rifle, the metallic clack echoing the finality of his combat resolve. "Target coordinates. Now. I'm uploading the telemetry to your nav point, John," she replied, her voice softening with concern. "But be incredibly careful. Lertz, the elevated biometric signature, is actively regrouping his forces. He's seen what you can do. He watched you dismantle his vanguard. He's adapting his tactics." The Titan of Amon Hen on the lower slopes, where the dense forest thinned into a jagged plateau of grey rock and stunted, twisting oaks, the battle reached a crescendo of mythic proportions. Optimus Prime, the last of the Autobot primes, had discarded his miniaturized humanoid form. Realizing the sheer scale of the ambush, he'd expanded to his full, terrifying 32-foot height in a display of magnificent, shifting geometry. His cobalt and crimson plating, etched with the glowing, protective elven runes of Lothlorien, caught the amber light of the setting sun. He looked less like a machine and more like a god of the stars who had descended in a fury to walk the earth. He didn't just fight, he was a localized force of nature. From his heavy forearm housings, he deployed his twin ion blasters. The massive, azure bolts of superheated plasma energy vaporized the thick, interlocking iron shields of the Uruk-hai, turning the heavy plate armor into molten slag in a fraction of a second. Freedom is the right of all sentient beings. Optimus's voice thundered, a tectonic, synthesized resonance that shook the very foundations of the hill and caused the Uruk-hai to falter. But for those who enforce the will of the shadow, there is only the justice of the spark. He swung his massive Enigan axe. The blazing orange plasma blade left a trail of superheated air that instantly ignited the falling autumn leaves. Each sweeping strike of the weapon cleared a dozen orcs at once, the kinetic impact sending localized shockwaves that shattered the bedrock beneath his heavy, treaded feet. Yet, even in his overwhelming fury, Optimus moved with a profound, almost sorrowful grace. He carefully stepped over the bodies of fallen Uruk-hai, deliberately positioning his massive frame to act as a physical shield between the advancing horde and the fleeing hobbits he was trying to protect. But the Uruk-hai were legion. Saruman had spent years in the pits of Isengard perfecting these monsters, breeding them to feel no fear and no pain. They did not retreat from the giant of metal. They swarmed his massive legs like an army of black ants, desperately driving heavy, black iron pikes into the vulnerable hydraulic seams of his armor, searching for a weak point. The fall of the White Tower in a smaller, sun-dappled clearing closer to the river. The tragedy of the Fellowship reached its breaking point. Boromir, the proud son of the Steward of Gondor, stood entirely alone. He was a man of the Third Age, a warrior of forged steel and painted wood, yet he had fought with the ferocity of a legend. Around him lay a mountain of slain Uruk-hai, but 3 heavy, black-fletched arrows now protruded from his chest, shafts of Lurtz's malice that had finally slowed the proud, desperate heartbeat of the White Tower. He fell heavily to his knees. The great horn of Gondor, which had blown its final, desperate call for aid, lay shattered and silent beside him in the blood-soaked ferns. The remaining Uruk-hai closed in slowly, their jagged, crude blades raised for the final harvest. Boromir, Aragorn's voice rang out through the trees, heavy with panic, but the ranger was 50 yards away, desperately buried under a sea of Uruk-hai pikes, fighting inch by inch to reach his brother. A new shadow fell over the clearing. It was not the shadow of the enemy, but the shadow of the 26th century. The Master Chief arrived. He didn't fire his rifle. He didn't want to risk hitting the kneeling man. Instead, he engaged his thruster pack. The twin blue flames vaporized the damp earth as the Spartan surged into the clearing with the speed of a low-flying missile. He landed violently between Boromir and the advancing orcs, cratering the earth. In his hands, the gravity hammer ignited with a terrifying, deep hum of violet kinetic energy. With a horizontal sweep that visibly distorted the very air, Chief swung the hammer. He didn't even need to strike the orcs directly. The localized gravity wave caught a dozen Uruk-hai, sending them flying backward through the ancient trees, their bones shattered by the kinetic shockwave before they even hit the ground. Chief stood as an unyielding wall of emerald green and polished gold, his visor reflecting the sudden, absolute terror in the remaining orcs' eyes as they broke and fled from the demon. Extraction point is heavily compromised, Boromir, Chief said, his voice surprisingly gentle and remarkably human through the helmet's external speakers. Stay with me. The weapon is prepping biofoam. Boromir looked up, dark blood staining his beard and lips. His eyes were wide, focused not on the Spartan, but on his own profound failure. He looked at this demon from another world who had fought for him without a moment's hesitation. They took them, Boromir gasped, his voice a wet rattle. The little one's Merry Pippin, I failed. I tried to take the ring from Frodo. No, Aragorn said, finally breaking free of the tree line and sliding frantically to Boromir's side, discarding his sword. You fought bravely. You kept your honor. You saved them. The eyes from the stars high above the cloud cover, safely hidden within the shimmering, golden fold of the Valor's infinite spatial dimension storage. The bridge of the Unsk infinity was a hive of tightly controlled intensity. Captain Thomas Lasky stood before the massive central holotable, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the real-time tactical feeds being relayed by the Chief's armor and Optimus's optic sensors. Captain, Commander Sarah Palmer reported sharply, striding up to the console, her voice tight with frustration. The primary Uruk-hai force is retreating rapidly toward the northwest, making for the plains. They've got the two secondary assets, the Hobbits. We can deploy a flight of heavily armed pelicans for immediate intercept and extraction. We can end this in 10 minutes. Lasky looked down at the glowing, holographic representation of Middle-earth, a vast, beautiful, and profoundly broken land. He thought of the Priam's words in Rivendell about the dangers of overfitting this fragile world with their overwhelming technology, about becoming the very tyranny they sought to destroy. Negative, Commander, Lasky decided, his voice firm. Look at the telemetry. The electromagnetic interference from Barad-dûr is spiking drastically. The Eye is actively searching. If we send a flight of pelicans screaming into the heart of Rohan, we'll trigger a full-scale, mobilized response from the lidless Eye before the ring-bearer even reaches the mountain pass. We'll expose the entire operation. But Captain, those are civilians. The Chief is there, Lasky said quietly, his eyes fixed on the blinking green dot on the map. And Optimus is with him. They're the best we've got. We have to trust our people on the ground. Maintain overwatch and keep the spatial armory open. The dawn of the hunt back at the shores of Path Galen. The sun had finally dipped below the jagged horizon, leaving the world in a bruised, deeply purple twilight. The deafening roar of battle had faded into a mournful, heavy silence, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic, mocking chanting of the retreating Uruk-hai. Frodo and Sam were gone. Their small elven boat was already a tiny, invisible speck on the vast, churning waters of the Anduin, moving relentlessly toward the dark, jagged peaks of the Imin Mule. Optimus Prime stood at the water's edge. His massive frame was scorched black by explosive powder and heavily dented by iron pikes, yet he stood unbroken. He looked toward the east, where the shadow of Mordor pulsed against the sky like a diseased heart. Through his connection to the Matrix, he felt the distinct absence of the ring not as a loss of power, but as a profound release of spiritual tension. The small, incredibly brave light of Frodo's spark was moving intentionally toward the absolute darkness. The Prime felt a heavy, overwhelming respect for the Hobbit's courage. It reminded him of the bravery of the smallest Autobots during the darkest days of Cybertron. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stood silently around Boromir's body, having laid his sword across his chest. The Ranger of the North looked up at the two Titans who stood with them in the gloom. The Fellowship has failed, Legolas whispered, his keen elven eyes clouded with a grief he rarely let show. The ring-bearer is gone, the halflings are taken, the wizard is lost to the deep, and Boromir has fallen. Master Chief stepped forward, the heavy gears of his armor clicking softly as he holstered his rifle and engaged his magnetic locks. He looked directly at the Ranger. The mission isn't over, Aragorn, Chief said, his voice a steady anchor in the despair. It's just changed its parameters. He is right, Optimus Prime said. His voice was a deep, resonant cello that seemed to heal the bruised air itself. He knelt, his massive, articulated hand coming to rest gently on the blood-soaked earth beside Boromir's still form. Gandalf did not fall into the abyss so that we would surrender to despair. Boromir did not give his life so that we would stop fighting. They fell so that we would have the time to find our own strength. Frodo and Sam moved toward the shadow alone, yes, but they carry the hope of two entire universes. Our primary duty is not to the ring anymore. It is to the brothers we have lost. We must save those who can still be saved. Aragorn looked up. He caught the fierce glint of the Prime's sapphire optics and the steady, unblinking gold of the Spartan's visor. He felt a sudden, massive surge of resolve that surpassed even his own royal blood. He looked away from the river, turning his gaze toward the trampled path of the Europe leading toward the wide plains of Rohan. "Then let us hunt," Aragorn said, his voice dropping into a growl of cold, Ranger iron. "We leave the boats." Legolas agreed instantly, his great bow of the Galadrim already in his hand. "And we travel light. We shall hunt orc," Gimli added fiercely, his double-bladed axe gleaming in the twilight. Master Chief reached his hand into the empty air, accessing the spatial storage one last time. He pulled out a series of small, highly advanced Unsk long-range comlinks and tossed them precisely to the three hunters. "Clip these to your collars," Chief instructed. "The weapon will maintain a secure tactical link. You'll have eyes from the stars. We don't walk blindly anymore." Optimus Prime stepped back and transformed. In a magnificent, deafening display of shifting geometry, he became the massive, long-nosed truck once more. However, utilizing his adaptive camouflage, his vibrant colors faded into a muted, tactical, matte gray, blending perfectly with the coming night. His massive engine roared to life. It was a sound that was neither animal nor ancient magic, but a terrifying cry of pure, industrial defiance that echoed across the river. Through the darkness, through the fire, Optimus's voice boomed from his external speakers, rolling across the plains. "The hunt has begun." Master Chief engaged his active camouflage. His emerald form shimmered, fragmented light wrapping around him, and then he disappeared entirely into the deep shadows of the ancient trees. "Let's finish the fight," a disembodied, gravelly voice echoed. The Fellowship of the Ring was broken, scattered to the winds of fate. But from its ashes, the Fellowship of Iron and Grace was born, as the three ancient hunters and the two titans of a distant future began their relentless sprint across the plains of Rohan. The world of Middle-earth trembled. The Shadow in the east had expected a secret, stealthy mission. It had expected to crush the waning strength of men. It had not expected the coming of a Spartan super soldier, the arrival of a Cybertronian Prime, and the absolute, unyielding promise that the light of freedom would never be extinguished without a devastating fight. The first part of the journey was over. The age of the machine and the myth had truly converged, and the hunters were coming. End of Part 1. The Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship is broken, but the hunt has only just begun. You've been listening to Part 1 of our epic What If series here on Zephyr. Master Chief, Optimus Prime, and the three hunters are now racing across the plains of Rohan, and the shadows of Isengard are about to learn that the future is coming for them. If you felt the spark of the Prime or the shield of the Spartan today, show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the Zephyr Wins. Tell us in the comments which legendary character from Halo or Transformers should join the fray in Part 2. Until the next chapter, keep your spark bright. This is Zephyr, signing off.